Chapter 4095. Such an expert would definitely be an official disciple in any top-notch sect. Lin Yi shook his head and explained, "That's not it. I'm still at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment, but I've always been able to defeat enemies of a higher level. It's not like you don't know about the things in the secular world. Here it's just the same." Hearing this, Sydney was immediately shocked. Lin Yi's words were said casually, but the meaning behind it was not as simple as that. The secular world and the heavenly island were two completely different levels. A top existence in the secular world like her was just the lowest level of an ant on the heavenly island. The so-called genius also depended on the quality of the gold. A peerless genius in the secular world was nothing on the heavenly island. Such examples could be found everywhere. Perhaps only a freak like Lin Yi, who could always transcend all the way to the end, could be called a real genius. After being shocked for a long time, Sydney finally came back to her senses. While she was sincerely happy for Lin Yi, she still couldn't help but worry. She gently bit her lips and said, "How about Lin Yi, you go alone first? You're strong and your appearance is different from the wanted poster. No one will come to trouble you. But it's different if you bring me along. It'll be difficult for us to move forward and it'll be impossible to escape. So in the future, don't say things like letting me go alone first. It's useless even if you say it. Anyway, I won't listen." Listening to these words, Sydney's heart warmed, and a long-lost happiness surged in her heart. Once again she threw herself into Lin Yi's arms and couldn't help but cry tears of joy. Lin Yi never said words of love, nor did he know how to say such words of love. He didn't even know how to please a woman. However, a reliable and responsible man was enough to kill all the romance and vows of eternal love. Holding Sydney in his arms, Lin Yi said, "Let's go, let's find a place to stay first." In this situation, it was already a pipe dream to take Sydney to escape from the central island. The only way was to find a safe and reliable place to stay, wait for the storm to pass, and then find a way to leave here. Letting Sydney lie on his back and cover her face, Lin Yi took the lead and walked out of the alley. On the street, all kinds of pedestrians came and went in an endless stream. Almost every 100 feet, there was a special notice board. The notice board was full of various sects, and the wanted posters for Lin Yi and Sydney were naturally included. Fortunately, Lin Yi was now in his original appearance, and Sydney didn't show her face. Thus, for the time being, no one would suspect the two of them. After passing through 2 streets, Lin Yi finally found the place. At first glance, it looked ordinary in front of him. However, it was a 3-story attic with a unique style on this bustling street. It was the destination of his trip, 5 Elements Commerce. When he was in the North Island, Hong Zhong had specially told him that if he was accidentally stranded in the Central Island, he could ask Deputy Shopkeeper Kai of 5 Elements Commerce, which was under the jurisdiction of the Central Island Alchemy Hall, for help. This sentence was just in case, but he didn't expect that it would come in handy under a freak combination of factors. It had even become the only life-saving straw that Lin Yi could grasp at the moment. Lin Yi had never seen this Deputy Shopkeeper Kai before, and he didn't know what kind of person he was. He didn't even know if he would be willing to help him or if he could help him. But other than that, Lin Yi had no other choice. After all, in this central island he was unfamiliar with the people and the place. Although Tian Chan was in the Middle Island Alchemy Hall, her status and strength were far from enough to protect the two of them. Before he solved the problem on his body, Lin Yi didn't want her to get involved in anything. As for his cheap master Zhang Liju, who he had never met before, if he could get his recognition, then he could do whatever he wanted. It was a pity that this elixir god was very secretive. Even the people from the Middle Island Alchemy Hall rarely saw him, let alone Lin Yi, who had just arrived. Without a choice, Lin Yi could only place his hope on this Deputy Shopkeeper Kai. Birds of a feather flocked together, and with Hong Zhong's kind character, a good friend that he respected so much, he shouldn't be someone who would forsake his friends for the sake of profit. Carrying Sydney on his back, Lin Yi didn't hesitate and walked into the 5 Elements Commerce. When the worker came to greet him, he said, "Please, I'm looking for Deputy Shopkeeper Kai." The worker looked him up and down and saw that he was carrying a woman on his back. He didn't have any suspicions and nodded, "Oh, you're here to see Deputy Shopkeeper Kai, right? I'll take you there." This Deputy Shopkeeper Kai was Zhang Liju's disciple in name. His medical skills were extremely good, and so there was an endless stream of people coming to see him. It was as if this place had become half a medical center, and the worker was used to it. Although some people complained in private, they didn't dare to show it. Even the real shopkeeper, who was backed by Zheng Dongjue, the deputy hall master of Middle Island Elixir Hall, didn't dare to do anything to this Deputy Shopkeeper Kai. Behind him was Zhang Liju, a super god. Even Jing Dongjue had to bow to him. Messing with him in this five elements commerce was equivalent to looking for death. He followed the worker silently and entered a secluded room on the second floor. The worker told Lin Yi and Lin Yi to wait for a while and left. After a while, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s walked in. Lin Yi didn't know his actual age, but the first impression he gave Lin Yi was that this man had a steady temperament that came from living in the world. This was all the result of time. Come have a seat. I am Kai Zhongyang. Are you two here to see a doctor? The man had a warm smile on his face. A doctor's heart was like a parent's. Although Kai Zhongyang was a businessman, he was still a doctor. He had the heart to save people. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have been able to become Zhang Liju's disciple. He couldn't lie in front of a real person and there were no other people around. Lin Yi said directly, I'm sorry, I'm not actually here to see a doctor. I have another request. What do you mean? Kai Zhongyang was slightly stunned. As the vice manager of the Five Elements Chamber of Commerce, he very rarely asked about business matters. Instead, he treated more patients and saved more people. Those that came to look for him were all for medical treatment, and there were very few other matters. Chapter 4096. Ah, it's Hong Zhong. Kai Zhongyang's eyes lit up, and the unfamiliarity between them disappeared instantly. His attitude toward Lin Yi and Lin Yi suddenly became warm. Few people know about my friendship with Hong Zhong. He has always been cautious. Since he told you about this, it means he trusts you very much, young hero Lin. You flatter me, Elder Kai. I've always been under Elder Hong's care. I'm ashamed. Lin Yi was happy. Judging from this person's behavior, his friendship with Hong Zhong should not be shallow, and it was not a simple acquaintance. Young hero Lin, you're too modest. Hong Zhong is a real businessman. If he can take care of you, it means you can take care of him. It's mutual. Kai Zhongyang knew Hong Zhong well and his comments were to the point. He laughed and said, Young hero Lin, how do you know Hong Zhong? This guy has always been in the North Island. He came back a few days ago and then he ran back to the North Island. I wanted to play chess with him, but I didn't have a chance to play chess with him. To tell you the truth, I'm a disciple of the 3 pavilions in the North Island, and I also met Elder Hong in the North Island. Recently, I came out to do a trial task but something happened on the way so I ended up in the Middle Island. Elder Hong asked me to come to Five Elements Commerce for help, Elder Kai, Lin Yi explained. I see. Well. Hong Zhong has never been polite to me. Who's this lady next to him? Kai Zhongyang turned to ask. Sydney and Lin Yi looked at each other and she said frankly, I'm Sydney. Nice to meet you, Elder Kai. Sydney? Why does this name sound so familiar? Kai Zhongyang was slightly stunned. Then he carefully looked at Xueli from head to toe. Then he suddenly realized something and said, If I'm not mistaken, the person who was wanted by the Snow Sword faction just now, could it be? That's right, it's the two of us. Now that things had come to this, it was obviously useless to try to conceal or deny it, so they could only admit it. The only thing that Lin Yi needed to be concerned about now was whether Kai Zhongyang's character was reliable or not. To this, Kai Zhongyang only nodded his head in understanding. He did not have any strange expression and said to Lin Yi and Li Yundong, You don't have to worry. Since you are friends of that old guy Hong Zhong, then you are also friends of me, Kai Zhongyang. Although the Snow Sword School is not small, it is not something that my Five Elements Commerce cares about. I'm still a disciple of Grandmaster Zhang Liju. Even if they had 10 guts, they wouldn't dare come here to search. You guys can stay here. Many thanks, Elder Kai. Lin Yi was taken aback for a moment before he hurriedly thanked him along with Sydney. He didn't expect this person to be so loyal and bear the burden for him without saying anything. Moreover, looking at his eyes, it didn't seem fake. But what surprised Lin Yi even more was that he was actually Zhang Liju's disciple? Was that her senior brother or junior brother? Haha, you're too courteous, young Master Lin. This is just a small matter, it's not worth mentioning. Come. This old man will have someone arrange a superior room for you. Both of you don't look too well, so you should take a good rest first. Kai Zhongyang immediately found a superior room for the two of them and sent them to their room. I still have something to take care of. You two rest first, we'll have dinner together tonight. Lin Yi watched as Kai Zhongyang left. Only then did Lin Yi and Sydney return to their room. Although they were still a little worried, it seemed that this friend that Hong Zhong introduced to them was still reliable. Of course, it wasn't the time to completely relax yet. If what Kai Zhongyang said was true, that he could easily protect the two of them, then half of the problem of being wanted by the Snow Sword School would be solved. Just as the two of them sat down in the room, they heard a loud noise coming from downstairs. Even with Shui Li's strength of heaven-level full completion, she could clearly sense what was happening downstairs. Sure enough, the disciples of the Snow Sword faction were here to look for someone. With the wanted poster in hand, the leading disciple of the Snow Sword School looked at the customers and workers of Five Elements Commerce and said loudly, "Anyone who knows where these two are, as long as you report it, you will be rewarded with 1,000 spirit jades." Has anyone seen them before? The entire crowd quietened down. Although the Five Elements Chamber of Commerce was the #1 leading chamber of commerce in the Merchant Union, those who came here to purchase pills were not necessarily local tycoons. As long as they made a report, they would be able to obtain 1,000 spirit jades. To most people, this temptation was still very big. However, temptation was one thing. If they didn't have any concrete information, no one would answer. After all, the Snow Sword School wasn't a small sect. Normal people wouldn't have the guts to lie to them. Has no one seen them before? A whole 1,000 spirit jades. There are so many people here, could it be that no one has seen them before? The leading disciple of the Snow Sword School shouted again. At this moment, Kai Zhongyang's voice suddenly came from the top of the stairs. "Snow Sword faction is truly awe-inspiring. You even came to my Five Elements Chamber of Commerce to arrest people. This old man would like to ask, who exactly gave you the courage to openly interfere with my Five Elements Chamber of Commerce's business?" With such a big accusation on them, all the disciples of the Snow Sword School shrunk their necks. The leading disciple was even more shocked. He stammered, "No. Vice Shopkeeper Kai, please don't be angry. We were just asking casually. Are you done asking now? Are you still not going to scram? Or do you want me to send you off personally?" Kai Zhongyang scolded with a cold face. He wouldn't care about this kind of thing normally. However, now that it involved Lin Yi and Su Li, it was a different matter. Yes. We'll scram now. The disciples of the Snow Sword School nodded and bowed. They didn't even dare to let out a fart. They just left with their tails between their legs. They weren't willing to do this kind of thing in the first place. These top chambers of commerce were all very powerful. Especially a giant like Five Elements Commerce, which had the support of the Middle Island Pill Hall. They wouldn't care about the Snow Sword School at all. This time he was just going through the motions to give his master an explanation. Otherwise he wouldn't have come to ask for trouble. Moreover, they had never thought that they would be able to find someone in a place like Five Elements Commerce. Naturally, they wouldn't dare and wouldn't go against Kai Zhongyang for this. What happened downstairs was clearly imprinted in Lin Yi's perception. Only then did he finally relax. This friend of Hong Zhong, Kai Zhongyang, was indeed a trustworthy and reliable person. He could finally stay in peace for a short period of time. He didn't need to hide anymore. Chapter 4097. Now. Sydney couldn't help but be stunned. In the past 6 months she had been dreaming of breaking through to the Zhuji realm almost every day, but she had never met this condition, let alone had this opportunity. She didn't know how to react to Lin Yi's sudden words. Lin Yi smiled and took out a supreme-grade foundation-building pill from his arms, which he had refined for Hong Zhong last time on the northernmost island. At that time he didn't auction all of them but kept some for himself. Now he took them out and gave them to Sydney. This is a foundation-building pill? Sydney was shocked when she saw it. Although she was only at the peak of the Heaven Stage, she had been on the Heaven Stage Island for a long time. She knew what a foundation-building pill was, which was an important pill to help people break through to the Zhuji realm. Even the Snow Sword School, a sect on the Middle Island, wouldn't give it to their disciples casually. She didn't expect that Lin Yi would take one out casually, and it seemed to be of the supreme grade. Yes, you can build your foundation as soon as possible after taking it, and you will have more power to protect yourself, so that you won't be bullied by any Tom, Dick or Harry in the future, Lin Yi said with a smile. Well, okay. Sydney had long regarded herself as Lin Yi's woman, so she didn't stand on ceremony and directly took the supreme grade foundation building pill. Her only thought now was that she didn't misjudge him. No matter where this man went, he was destined to be a strong man. He had only been on the Heaven Stage Island for more than half a year, and his strength had improved by leaps and bounds to the peak of the late stage of Zhuji realm. What was more exaggerated was that even Wei Xinjin, who was at the early stage of Gold Core, was defeated by him. If this was spread out, it would really shock the world. Of course, what shocked Sydney even more was Lin Yi's connections. He was far away in the North Island, but he had acquaintances in the Middle Island, and it was a top force like Five Elements Commerce. Moreover, it seemed that his connections were absolutely reliable and wouldn't betray him. This made Sydney feel that It was not without reason that Lin Yi could go from a rogue cultivator in the secular world to an existence that all the ancient sects were afraid of. Perhaps, one day Lin Yi would also have a place in the Middle Island where there were so many masters. After adjusting her state, she took the supreme grade foundation building pill. Then, Lin Yi personally taught Sydney how to run the true chi in her body and guided her step by step to break through to the foundation. Xueli was not inferior to the others in terms of foundation and talent. Now, with the help of the supreme grade foundation elixir and Lin Yi's guidance, breaking through to the foundation realm was a piece of cake. There weren't any problems during the process. Yang stage. I Huang Ti. Lin, I, E, through by Lin, Du Huang Ti, I. Yang Ti Ti to Chen Huang Di since Lin by, a Lin to Tian de Se Ming to. I. The desire to break through to the foundation establishment realm had accumulated in her heart for such a long time. However, in the past half a year, there was no need to talk about success. There was not even the slightest bit of improvement. It had always been so out of reach. Now that he had met Lin Yi, it had only been a day but he had directly achieved it in one go. Isn't this a little too unbelievable? Of course. You're now a true early-stage foundation establishment expert. However, things are going to be a bit troublesome from now on. Lin Yi smiled. He furrowed his brows slightly. What happened? Sydney's heart immediately tightened. She thought that something had gone wrong in the process of breaking through to the foundation establishment stage. There were repercussions. Do you have the rest of the mantra for Snow Valley? Lin Yi asked. No. Sydney was stunned. Me neither. Lin Yi shrugged helplessly and said worriedly, so the problem now is that you've become an early-stage foundation establishment expert, but there's no way for you to continue cultivating. This. Sydney finally recovered from the joy of breaking through to the foundation establishment stage. She realized her awkward situation and didn't know what to do for a while. Although it was beautiful to break through to the foundation establishment stage, the strength of the early-stage foundation establishment stage was not enough in the heavenly stage island, especially in the middle island. She still couldn't escape the fate of being cannon fodder. The rest of the mantra was a crucial problem. There was no room for carelessness. Sydney had just succeeded in building her foundation and had not stabilized yet. If she couldn't cultivate for a long time, not only would she not be able to improve further, her strength might even fall back to the heavenly stage realm. Then she would be wasted. Actually, it's not that there's no way. Although the cultivation mantra is treasured by the big sects, as long as you go out and look for it, you should be able to buy it. The biggest problem now is that the mantra you buy might not be suitable for you to cultivate. Lin Yi analyzed. Since he did not have the original Shuegu follow-up cultivation method, then he could only find other cultivation methods to continue cultivating. However, the cultivation methods had always been different from each other. Once the follow-up cultivation method conflicted with the original cultivation method, the lightest consequence would be Qigong deviation, and the worst consequence would be death on the spot. Other than some special reasons, there were very few people in the cultivation world who would change their cultivation mantra midway. It was also because of this consideration. Sydney thought for a while and said, actually when I first came here the big sects in the Middle Island did a constitution and mantra test for us, the experts in the secular world. They said that I was born with a body of ice, which was very compatible with the Snow Sword faction's mantra. That was why I was brought to the Snow Sword faction. In the past half a year, the reason why Sydney always had high hopes for the Snow Sword faction was because of this. As long as she could cultivate the Snow Sword faction's mantra like the normal disciples, even if it was the most basic, she believed that she would not be any worse than the others. However, she didn't expect that fate would make a fool out of her. After becoming Situ Qian's maid, she didn't even have the chance to cultivate normally, let alone the Snow Sword faction's mantra. In that case, we just need to find a way to get the Snow Sword faction's mantra, right? Lin Yi's eyes brightened. Sydney nodded. However, she said helplessly, that is true, but the Snow Sword faction is a big sect on the Middle Island. The mantra is the foundation of the sect. It is a secret that cannot be passed on. It is impossible for it to be leaked, and it is even more impossible for us to buy it. That is a problem. However, there is always a way. Since we have found the direction, we will be able to find a way to solve it. We just need to spend a bit more time thinking about it, Lin Yi comforted. As the saying went, money could make the gods move. As long as he did not lack spiritual jades, he would definitely be able to get the Snow Sword faction's mantra for Sydney. At that moment, Kai Zhongyang's voice suddenly came from the door. What exactly is troubling the two of you? Do you need my help? Chapter 4098. Haha, such a small matter is not worth mentioning. Those people from the Snow Sword School treated you too like that. Do you think I should be nice to them? Kai Zhongyang said with a smile. However, his gaze soon stopped on Sydney. He said in surprise, "Eh? Lady Sydney was only at the peak of Heaven Realm before. It hasn't even been half a day, and you've already reached Foundation Establishment? You're truly a heaven-sent genius. Congratulations. Elder Kai is too kind. This is all thanks to Linny. Without his guidance and the Foundation Establishment pills, I wouldn't even be able to reach Foundation Establishment, let alone succeed," Sydney explained. "Haha, you two are not ordinary people, so don't be too modest." Kai Zhongyang nodded with a smile. Since Lin Yi was Hong Zhong's friend, it was not strange at all that he had Foundation Establishment pills. After a pause, Kai Zhongyang continued, "When I was at the door, I heard you two mention the mental cultivation method of the Snow Sword School. Are you two troubled by this?" "That's right." Lin Yi and Sydney looked at each other. From what they had seen before, this vice shopkeeper was someone they could rely on. There was no need to hide it from him. "In that case, please wait a moment. I'll be back soon." Kai Zhongyang smiled mysteriously. He turned and left the room, leaving Lin Yi and Sydney looking at each other. After a while, Kai Zhongyang returned with a simple but exquisite scroll. He smiled and handed it to Lin Yi. "This is?" Lin Yi took it and opened it. His eyelids twitched and he said in surprise, "Snow Sword Mental Cultivation Method? Elder Kai, why do you have this?" He was just thinking about how to get his hands on the Snow Sword School's mental cultivation method, and Kai Zhongyang just turned around and gave it to him. He was just about to doze off when someone sent him a pillow. Kai Zhongyang laughed. "Master Lin, have you forgotten? My Shifu is a Dan god. Even the heads of these sects, including the Snow Sword School, have to be humble when they ask for my Shifu's help. My Shifu owns the 5 elements commerce and he doesn't lack spirit jade. If you want him to concoct pills, you'll have to exchange rare resources. Other than those rare treasures, the rest are the mental cultivation methods of the sections." Lin Yi was secretly speechless. The sect masters of Middle Island sects, which one of them wasn't a ruthless character who could shake the world with a stomp of their feet? In the end, they all had to be so humble in front of his cheap master. It could be seen that when one's alchemy skills reached the level of the pill god, they could eat both big and small. But, no matter what, this mental cultivation method was the top secret of the sects, and it wasn't easy for Zhang Liju to get it. He didn't believe that the Snow Sword School didn't have any other treasures, and the only reason was that Zhang Liju wanted this. Kai Zhongyang continued, "My Shifu came back a while ago and he gave me some of the rare treasures he got in recent years. He asked me to be in charge of these rare resources, and prepare for the upcoming Middle Island Auction Festival." Middle Island Auction Festival? Lin Yi paused. In his mind, he couldn't help but think of the 4 Islands Auction Festival in the far North Island. "Have you never heard of it, Master Lin?" The so-called Central Island Auction Festival is a large-scale auction that all the chambers of commerce on the Central Island can participate in. It's officially organized by the Central Island Master and the Council of Elders. It's already the highest standard auction festival among the 5 great islands. Kai Zhongyang explained patiently, "Every item in this auction is a rare treasure. My Shifu gave me this Snow Sword School mental cultivation method in preparation for this." "I see." Lin Yi was fascinated by it. Any cultivator would be tempted by this kind of top auction where treasures gathered. However, he could only think about it for now. After all, he had to find a way to get back to the North Island, and he didn't know if he could make it in time. After a pause, Lin Yi suddenly pointed at the Snow Sword mental cultivation method in his hand and asked curiously, "Elder Kai, since this was prepared for this, how are you going to auction it if you give it to me now?" Kai Zhongyang looked at Lin Yi strangely and smiled, "It won't spoil even if I look at it. You can just take a copy and give it back to me later, right?" "That works?" Lin Yi and Sydney froze. Haha, the core mental cultivation method is the secret of each sect. Even if the Snow Sword School gave it to my master, they definitely won't allow anyone to copy it. Even if they win it in the auction, they won't allow anyone to copy it. That's the rule of the Jianghu. But rules are dead. Master Lin, you're Hong Zhong's friend, so of course I have to let you off the hook. Kai Zhongyang said with a sigh, "Hong Zhong and I are friends who have gone through life and death together. We saved each other's lives when we were young, so how could we be restricted by these rules?" Lin Yi nodded. It turned out that the two of them were friends who had gone through life and death together. No wonder Kai Zhongyang was so protective of him. Indeed, it was just as he had said. Under normal circumstances, the core mental cultivation methods of the various sects were not allowed to be copied. Not only would the sects pursue this matter if it was spread out, but even if one did not consider this risk, no matter who had spent a huge price to bid for this mental cultivation method, they would definitely hide it. Others might not even be able to take a look at it, let alone copy it. If it weren't for this rule of the Jianghu, if it weren't for the fact that everyone was selfish and liked to keep it a secret, the cultivation methods of all the sects would have been passed down for hundreds and thousands of years, and they would have been spread all over the street. They would not be as rare as they were now. They would not be like the ordinary mental cultivation methods in the secular world in the North Island, which were everywhere. The truly profound mental cultivation methods were extremely rare. In that case, I won't stand on ceremony with you, Elder Kai, Linny said immediately. Although he didn't like to owe people favors, this snow sword mental cultivation method was very important to Sydney. Since Kai Zhongyang had already given it to him, there was no reason to refuse it. He could only think of a way to make it up to him in the future. What's more, apart from the relationship with Hong Zhong, he and Kai Zhongyang had another closer relationship, which was that they were fellow disciples of the same sect. Even if it wasn't time for them to recognize each other, there was no need to be too polite. He handed the snow sword mental cultivation method to Sydney and asked her to copy it on the side. Lin Yi and Kai Zhongyang prepared a table of good dishes and wine, and sat together to chat. Although there was a huge age gap between them, they were both masters of alchemy and had unique medical skills. Whatever they said was a common topic. For a while they chatted happily. They regretted not meeting each other earlier and became real friends despite their age difference. Chapter 4099. If everything went according to plan, once he reunited with Zhang Liju, this cheap master of his would become his biggest support on Sky-class Island. It wouldn't be a bad idea to know more about him before that. Although he had heard of Zhang Liju's legendary deeds from other people, those were mostly rumors passed down from mouth to mouth. It wasn't as reliable as the words of people close to him like Kai Zhongyang. Man, I'm just a disciple in name, I'm not a proud disciple. Kai Zhongyang shook his head with a smile. A disciple in name is still a proud disciple, otherwise why would he give you resources like the snow sword arts, Elder Kai? Could it be that Grandmaster Zhang has a lot of direct disciples? Linny probed. Direct disciples? Kai Zhongyang raised an eyebrow. Speaking of this, my master is quite unconventional. At his level, which of the other big shots didn't have disciples everywhere? Only my master is different. Not to mention direct disciples, he doesn't even have many disciples in name. He doesn't accept people easily. Grandmaster Zhang is such a legend, and he doesn't even have a direct disciple? Linny couldn't help but be curious. Only direct disciples could be the true inheritors of the legacy. Could it be that his cheap master had lost all hope, and had even accepted something like a master's legacy? Speaking of this, my master did say something ambiguous before, saying that he should have a direct disciple in the common world. Kai Zhongyang suddenly said. Should. Linny paused. Kai Zhongyang smiled bitterly. That's what my master said, and us disciples were all confused. If he did, then he did, if he didn't, then he didn't. What did this should mean? But my master didn't say much and we didn't ask. It's become an unsolved mystery in the Hall of Elixir now. At this point Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know how he did it, but judging from Liju's words, he already knew that Lin Yi had received his inheritance in the common world. It was just that he couldn't confirm it before they met face to face. Lin Yi suddenly remembered. The people who came after Zhang Liju's tomb, could it be? Although he already understood, Lin Yi didn't show it on his face. Instead he changed the subject. Elder Kai, you're the vice manager of 5 Elements Commerce. I wonder if you could help me get some heart-devouring exquisite grass and life-growing mushrooms? The life mushroom is a little more difficult, but the heart-devouring exquisite grass is not a problem. I will get someone to look in the warehouse. The Chamber of Commerce might not have it, but most of them are ready-made elixirs. However, the pill hall should have it. Kai Zhongyang was very straightforward and agreed without hesitation. Many thanks, Elder Kai. Linny said gratefully. He had only casually asked about the life mushroom, and the heart-devouring exquisite grass was naturally used to refine the foundation-building pill. This wasn't just for himself, more importantly it was for Sydney. Lin Yi himself was already at the peak of the late phase of foundation building, and he had just broken through not too long ago. He wouldn't be able to use it for a while. However, Sydney's strength was simply too weak. She didn't even have the ability to protect herself. If he didn't increase her strength as soon as possible, if anything were to happen in the future, it could easily lead to a tragedy. The snow sword practitioner's arts were already in place, and with the foundation building pill with snow sword's talent, Breaking through quickly shouldn't be a problem. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. The Snow Sword School had mobilized all of their forces to put Ling Yi and Sydney on the wanted list. However, it was as if the two had vanished from the face of the earth. Not only were they unable to find them, but there wasn't even a single report of them being seen. Logically speaking, since they had already given out a reward of 1,000 spirit jades, if someone saw it, they would definitely report it to the Snow Sword School. In the end, after 3 days, not even a single person had come. Helpless, the Snow Sword School could only give up for now. They were a huge school, especially in a place like the Middle Island where dragons and tigers resided. They had all sorts of important matters to attend to every day. They couldn't possibly waste so much manpower for a mere servant girl who had eloped and escaped. As for Wei Xinjin, although he hated Ling Yi and Sydney to the bone, he didn't have the energy to look for them every day. He had already released the news of his wedding. If he continued to delay it, he would only become a laughing stock. Now that the arrow was already knocked on the bow, he had no choice but to marry Situ Qian. In any case, the invitation that he had sent out previously only stated that he, Wei Xinjin, was going to marry a Dao companion. However, it didn't specify who it was. It only said that she was a disciple of the Snow Sword School. Although Sydney had run away, the remaining Situ Qian just so happened to meet this condition and could take her place. Strictly speaking, Wei Xinjin didn't really like Situ Qian. It could only be said that she was a disciple of the Snow Sword School. Although Sydney had run away, the remaining Situ Qian just so happened to meet this condition and could take her place. But now Wei Xinjin was forced to the point where he had no other choice. He could only use this method. The only thing that comforted him was that Situ Qian's conditions were not bad. Although she wasn't as pretty as Sydney, her appearance wasn't bad either. More importantly, Situ Qian had a strong background. In the Snow Sword School, Wei Xinjin's only backing was the Great Elder. Furthermore, they only had a slight relationship, which couldn't be compared to Situ Qian, the Great Elder's granddaughter. After marrying Situ Qian, not only would he be able to bring home a beauty, his position in the Snow Sword School would also rise. He would become a core disciple that was truly relied upon. It could be considered as killing 2 birds with 1 stone. As for Ling Yi and Sydney, no matter how unwilling Wei Xinjin was, he could only put them aside for the time being. It was impossible for the Snow Sword School to continue wasting so much manpower. The past 3 days had already proven that it was impossible to capture someone just by relying on the arrest warrant. If they wanted to obtain an immediate effect, they would have to invite the law enforcement hall of the Middle Island to make a public arrest. It was a pity that the influence of the Snow Sword School was not strong enough to do that. Young hero Lin, let me tell you a piece of good news. The arrest warrant from the Snow Sword School has been removed. Kai Zhongyang quickly brought this news to Lin Yi and Ling Yi. Really? That's great. Lin Yi and Sydney were instantly overjoyed. Even if this did not mean that the Snow Sword School had completely let them go, at least they could move around more freely in the future. They did not need to be cooped up in this room, unable to go out. Chapter 4100. After a pause, Kai Zhongyang said, "Oh yes, young Master Lin, I've got the news about the heart-devouring exquisite grass you asked me to find. Although I haven't found it in the Chamber of Commerce or the Alchemy Hall, some trial teams have gone to collect it. They'll be back in a few days. Just wait patiently for a while." "Okay, thank you for your trouble, Elder Kai." Lin Yi nodded happily. In the past 3 days, the thing that troubled him the most was how to arrange a place for Sydney in the future. He definitely couldn't go back to Snow Sword School, but it was unrealistic to ask Sydney to follow him back to the North Island. Even if Lin Yi had a relationship with Shangguan Tianhua, it would be very difficult to arrange a place for Sydney to enter the 3 pavilions, especially when Shangguan Tianhua mistakenly thought that there was something going on between him and Shangguan Laner. If he suddenly brought back a super beauty as Shangguan Laner's grandfather, no matter how open-minded he was, he might have to have a good talk with Lin Yi about his life ideal. If it didn't work, he could only ask Ning Xuefei to find a way to take Xueli to the West Island. It was a gathering place for female cultivators. With the help of Ning Xuefei, the little princess, Xueli should have a good life there. However, this was the last resort. After all, if he wanted to do this, Lin Yi had to take Sydney back to the North Island first. Not only would Shangguan Tianhua know, but the dangers they would encounter along the way were already a big problem that couldn't be solved. Sydney's current strength was really too weak. Moreover, when he took Sydney back, it was already unknown whether Ning Xuefei would still be in the North Island. After all, so many days had passed, and Ning Xuefei just came out to play with Shangguan Laner. It was unlikely that she would stay in the North Island all the time. After pondering for a while, Lin Yi suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and another familiar and beautiful face appeared in his mind, Tian Chan. Last time they parted in a hurry on the far north island, Lin Yi didn't know how she was now. This unexpected trip to Middle Island was unexpected for Lin Yi, but since he was already here he must find a way to see Tian Chan. Elder Kai, you're the vice manager of 5 Elements Commerce and Grandmaster Zhang's in-name disciple. You're a member of Nakajima's Hall of Alchemy. Do you know Tian Chan? She is also a disciple of the Pill Hall. Lin Yi asked. Tian Chan? Young hero Lin, if you were to ask other normal Pill Hall disciples, this old man might not necessarily know them. After all, there are so many Pill Hall disciples, and this old man is always at the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, so I don't spend much time there. However, this Tian Chan is an exception. Oh? Why is that? Lin Yi was puzzled. Hey, this old man knows her because there has been an uproar about something related to her recently. Everyone in the Middle Island Dan Hall, including the entire 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, knows about it, so this old man has also heard of it. Kai Zhongyang said. What is it? Elder Kai, tell me quickly. Lin Yi's heart tightened as he asked quickly. Although Tian Chan was not as miserable as Shueli in Middle Island, she was still in a bad situation. She was alone, and no matter what happened, she would not be the one to benefit from it. It's a long story. The source has to start from the North Island. Kai Zhongyang immediately told Lin Yi everything he knew about Tian Chan. Finally he sighed and said, this Tian Chan is also a girl with a hard life. She was forced to marry someone at such a young age. Heaven is really jealous of her beauty. Before he finished speaking, Kai Zhongyang's eyelids suddenly twitched. Then he saw that Lin Yi's body suddenly emitted an extremely violent aura. He was puzzled and secretly shocked. If he wasn't wrong, Lin Yi's strength should only be at the peak of the late stage of foundation establishment. However, this aura, why did it feel like it was comparable to a beginner stage gold core expert? Jing Dongjue, you old man. If I don't tear you into pieces in this life, I, Lin Yi, swear that I'm not a human. Lin Yi was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. He clenched his fists tightly and flew into a rage. With his personality, even if someone was stupid enough to provoke him, he would at most kill them. Normally he wouldn't get angry at all, let alone lose control of his emotions like now. However, today, after hearing about Tian Chan's experience, Lin Yi completely lost control. This time he accidentally came to Middle Island. First he heard about Sydney's matter. Now he learned about Tian Chan's miserable experience. How could Lin Yi not go berserk? Lin Yi, calm down first. Seeing this, Sydney quickly pulled him, for fear that he would lose control of his emotions and rush out. One must know that this was Middle Island, where experts gathered. Gold core experts were everywhere and foundation establishment experts were like dogs. Once Lin Yi lost control and went berserk, he would definitely be the one to suffer. Young hero Lin, why are you so agitated? Kai Zhongyang looked at Lin Yi's reaction and couldn't help but feel strange. Tian Chan is the same as me. When we were in the secular world, she and Lin Yi... Sydney had to explain with a blush. Although she didn't finish her words, Kai Zhongyang had already understood. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This Lin Yi was really a romantic person. When he was in the secular world he had so many beauties. This Sydney in front of him was already a first-class super beauty. He heard that Tian Chan was the same. The words femme fatale were really not wrong at all, especially on Heaven Stage Island where the strong preyed on the weak. Whether it was Sydney or Tian Chan, the reason why they attracted so much trouble was because they were too beautiful. However, Kai Zhongyang suddenly thought of his master. In fact, it was the same. He brought Master Bing and Master Xue from the secular world, and it seemed to have caused quite a stir in the beginning. Kai Zhongyang pondered for a moment, then said to Lin Yi, young hero Lin, it's not impossible for you to meet Tian Chan. My senior and junior brothers are all in the Pill Hall. We are all Master's nominal disciples and we take care of each other. I can ask them for help and let you meet Tian Chan. Really? Lin Yi's berserk aura stopped momentarily, and his mind slowly recovered from the rage. Kai Zhongyang nodded affirmatively and said, but you have to promise me one thing first. You can't be impulsive. My master is not in the Pill Hall now, and Zheng Dongjue is the most powerful deputy hall master. He is the person with the most power in the Pill Hall. If you want to challenge him with your current strength, you are courting death. Even I can't help you. Lin Yi took a deep breath and lowered his head to calm down for a moment. Then he nodded and agreed, okay, I will listen to Elder Kai. Chapter 4101. Well, in a few days I will take the opportunity of preparing for the auction of Zhongdao to go back to Alchemy Hall. At that time, young hero Lin, you can pretend to be my attendant. What do you think? Kai Zhongyang suggested. Thank you, old Kai. Lin Yi was grateful from the bottom of his heart. Just because they were friends, Kai Zhongyang was willing to help him so much. He must remember this kindness and favor. Although he still had to wait for a few more days, Lin Yi's heart was full of expectation at the moment. Even though he had met her last time in the far north island, after hearing what happened to Tianchan recently, Lin Yi's mood to meet Tianchan had become eager. As Lin Yi's woman, Sydney was not very jealous of this. Instead, she empathized with Tianchan's experience. After all, wasn't she the same? She was the same, and so was Tianchan. It seemed that the beautiful female cultivators from the secular world could not escape this disaster. She didn't know how Rock Candy was now. In the past, Xueli and Rock Candy were sworn enemies in the secular world. But now that she thought about it, the so-called grudge between them was nothing. Sydney couldn't help but ask, "By the way, Lin Yi, besides Tianchan and me, who else did you find from the secular world?" She was too embarrassed to point out that it was Rock Candy, but Lin Yi understood what she meant. He shook his head and said, "I have no news of these confidants except you and Tianchan. But as for others, Zhong Pingliang, Kong Mingming and Dongfang Badeo were all transmitted to the North Island like me and joined the 3 pavilions of the North Island." I see. Sydney couldn't help but be a little disappointed, but she still forced herself to comfort him. "It's okay. I believe they will all be fine. As long as you are here, we will all be together again." "Yes, I will." Lin Yi nodded heavily, but the worry in his heart still lingered. It was only now that he found out about Sydney and Tianchan. Furthermore, they were not in a good situation. Heaven knew how Han Jingjing and the other girls were doing right now. If he wanted to find them, he had to raise his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would not be able to move an inch no matter where he went. Middle Island Pill Hall. He came out of the room of the will of heaven. Tianchan's expression was calm, but there was a hint of helplessness. After so long, the will of heaven was still the same as before, crazy and crazy. He still refused to admit himself. Now that things had come to this, Tianchan no longer wished for the Heaven Path to acknowledge her. She only wished that she could do her best to take care of this elder who was related to her by blood. However, the Heaven Path would curse her every time they saw each other, and now it was only getting worse. What was she to do? At this moment, a figure flashed out from the darkness and stopped her. It was her brother-in-law in name, Zheng Tianchu. "Sister-in-law, are you here to send medicine to Master Tian again? It's lonely to be alone. Let me accompany you next time." Zheng Tianchu's eyes glanced up and down at Tianchan's exquisite body. Tianchan frowned. There was a flash of disgust in her eyes. She didn't want to talk to him, but out of courtesy she still endured the disgust and said, "No, I can do it alone. I don't know what else you want, young master?" Zheng Tianchu didn't notice this. He took a step closer to Tianchan and said with a frivolous smile, "I heard people say that Middle Island has not been peaceful recently. Recently, our Central Island has not been peaceful. 2 traitors escaped from the Snow Sword faction. One of them is a rapist. He has already taken away a female disciple of Snow Sword School. Sister-in-law, you have to be careful. Don't be tricked. Thank you for your concern, but this is Middle Island Pill Hall. No matter how blind the rapist is, it is impossible for him to come to such a place." Tianchan took a step back calmly. "Be that as it may, you still can't stop someone's lust. Especially with such a beautiful woman like you here, that rapist might get hot-headed and come over. As the saying goes, even if one were to die under a peony, he would still be a romantic even if he became a ghost." Zheng Tianchu's smile became more and more frivolous, and he took another step forward. The meaning of flirting was obvious. In addition, there was no one around. Tianchan knew that if she continued to pester like this, the other party might have lustful thoughts and make a move. At that time, it would be difficult to deal with it. Tianchan immediately turned cold and frowned. "Young master, you worry too much. If there is nothing else, please let me go. I have to go back first." "Oh, sister-in-law, don't be so anxious. Anyway, no one will accompany you when you go back. You are in the prime of your life. It is the time to have fun. But you stay alone in your room. Don't you think it is boring?" Zheng Tianchu did not give up. Not only did he not let her go, but he reached out to touch Tianchan's face. Tianchan quickly avoided and warned with a cold face, "Men and women should not touch each other. I am your sister-in-law. Young master, please behave yourself." "Sister-in-law, don't be so serious." Zheng Tianchu suddenly laughed and looked up and down at Tianchan. His eyes were full of obscenity. He chattered on, "People say that women need a man's nourishment to stay young and beautiful. Although you are my sister-in-law and my cousin's woman, my cousin is dead now. He doesn't have the ability to nourish you. But now that I have inherited his position, I naturally have to fulfill the corresponding responsibility. What do you say, sister-in-law? Such explicit and shameless words really made Tianchan angry. When they first met, Jing Tianchu was frivolous, but at least he still maintained the last bit of bottom line. But now, as her position in Jing Dongjua's eyes was gradually consolidated, his behavior began to become more unscrupulous. After several encounters, Tianchan had a deep understanding of Jing Tianchu's shameless nature. The more she pestered him, the more excited he became, and the more he wanted to take a yard when given an inch. Young master, does your grandfather know that you are doing this? Tianchan snorted coldly and immediately ignored him. She turned sideways and directly walked around him. Humph, you still want to play chastity with me? Interesting, I want to see how long you can last. Looking at Tianchan's graceful back, Jing Tianchu's eyes suddenly flashed a trace of ruthlessness. Although he had always coveted his sister-in-law, his patience was always limited. Now his patience was almost exhausted. A few days later, Lin Yi finally received the exact news from Kai Zhongyang. He had already discussed with the senior at the Dan Hall. Now that everything was ready, he could bring Lin Yi to see Tianchan. Chapter 4102. This time he showed up with his original appearance. After all, the appearance of Wu Fu with the 1,000 silk mask had been plastered all over the street. Although the Snow Sword faction had withdrawn the wanted order, there were too many people on the street. It was hard to guarantee that no one would notice him. It was better to show his original appearance. Anyway, no one in the Middle Island would be able to recognize him. The Middle Island Pill Hall was one of the top sects in Middle Island. Whether it was status or influence, it was an outstanding existence. This could be seen just from its geographical location. Middle Cauldron Mountain was located in the center of Middle Island. Not only did it represent the highest mountain in Middle Island, but its unique location and environment also nurtured a large number of legendary realm experts. According to records, the earliest batch of cultivators on Heaven Island settled down in Middle Cauldron Mountain. After thousands or even tens of thousands of years, the cultivation world on Heaven Island was prosperous. Middle Cauldron Mountain's high status on Heaven Island was undeniable. Settling down in Middle Cauldron Mountain not only meant that one could occupy coveted cultivation resources, but more importantly, it represented an unparalleled transcendental status on Middle Island. Even those powerful sects that could establish a foothold on Middle Island, including the Snow Sword faction, had never been able to reach the core area of Middle Cauldron Mountain. There were no more than 5 transcendental forces that could enter Middle Cauldron Mountain in the entire Heaven Island, and the Middle Island Pill Hall was one of them. Following Kai Zhongyang all the way to the entrance of the Middle Island Pill Hall, Lin Fan looked at the quaint, tranquil and beautiful paradise inside, and then looked at the bustling scene outside. It was just a door away, but there was such a stark contrast. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh when he saw it. This feeling of serenity in the midst of chaos reminded Lin Yi of a saying in the secular world. It was said that those who could live in a courtyard house in the core area of Yanjing were the big shots. The wonderful scene in front of him. Wasn't that the case before? The layout of the Middle Island Pill Hall was like a super villa with an exquisite structure. Other than a few large doors, there were quiet and elegant pavilions connected to each other at almost every location. They were all intertwined and looked magnificent. He passed through one door after another without any obstruction. However, there were no guards in sight. It was the complete opposite of what he had expected. Lin Yi couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Elder Kai, has the Nakajima Alchemy Hall always been like this? Why aren't there any guards?" A place like the Pill Hall. Whether it was ready-made elixirs or elixir materials, they were all treasures that made people's hearts pound. No matter how famous the Middle Island Pill Hall was in the face of benefits, it was hard to guarantee that people wouldn't take risks out of desperation. This was human nature and it couldn't be stopped. Kai Zhongyang smiled and said, "Young hero Lin, there's something you don't know. Don't be fooled by the fact that we didn't see any guards along the way. This place is loose on the outside but tight on the inside. Those guards are just hiding in the dark. He just didn't want outsiders to see it. The security of our Pill Hall is second to none even in all of the 5 great islands of the Heaven Stage. The reason why they didn't come to interrogate you is because I got someone to specially inform them earlier." I see, Lin Yi finally understood. If the security was really as loose as it looked, then in the Heaven Stage Island where the strong preyed on the weak, the Middle Island Pill Hall wouldn't have such a high position today. Moments later, Lin Yi followed Kai Zhongyang to a small manor deep in the core. Compared to the outside, the environment here was better and there were very few people. There wasn't even a normal disciple passing by. Seeing that Lin Yi was curious, Kai Zhongyang turned around and introduced, "This garden is an area specially reserved for the disciples under our master. Other normal disciples don't have the right to enter or exit here. Even the vice head has to inform us if he wants to enter or exit here." Lin Yi nodded. Zhang Liju was the one who created the Middle Island Pill Hall, and it wasn't strange for his disciples to have this privilege. At this time a young man walked over and smiled at the two. "Brother Kai, you guys are here. Is this the Lin Yi you told me about?" Lin Yi turned around and looked at Kai Zhongyang. He smiled and nodded. "That's right, this is Lin Yi. Young hero Lin, this is Ho Guanqi. He's the same as me, a disciple under master's name. But don't look at him just because he looks young. He's our big disciple. Be it talent or strength, he's the highest among us, and the one that master values the most." "I'm Lin Yi, nice to meet you, Senior Ho," Lin Yi quickly greeted. The guy looked so young and it felt weird to call him Elder Ho. He might not like it, but he couldn't call him big disciple directly. He could only call him senior for now. "Ha Lin Yi, don't be nervous. I've known Hong Zhong for a long time, and I've heard about your situation from Kai Zhongyang. I'll do my best to help." Ho Guanqi had a friendly smile on his face as he patted Lin Yi's shoulder. "That's right. I was able to bring you here successfully because of big disciple Ho's help. Otherwise, even I wouldn't be able to bring people back so casually. After all, this is an important place for the Pill Hall. Unless it's a disciple of our sect, outsiders aren't allowed to enter." Kai Zhongyang explained. "Thank you, Senior Ho," Lin Yi said gratefully. Then he couldn't contain the excitement in his heart and asked impatiently, "When can I see Tian Chan?" Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other and smiled. Then he said to Lin Yi, "My friend, you're really infatuated. Don't worry, I promise that you'll get what you want. However, we need to keep this a secret. We can't go to Tian Chan directly. We need to find a compromise." "A compromise?" Lin Yi was slightly stunned. He knew that if he went to see Tian Chan directly, it would be easy for people to notice him. With Tian Chan's current sensitive identity, it wouldn't be good for her. "That's right. I've heard of something that can be put to use." Ho Guanqi nodded and said, "I've heard that Tian Chan has been visiting Elder Tian a lot lately. Every few days she would go there. So, if we spread the word that we found an alchemist to treat Elder Tian, people won't care about it. But if Tian Chan hears about it, she'll definitely go there." "That's right. Let Tian Chan take the initiative to go over. It's better than us looking for her. That way young hero Lin, you and Tian Chan will only have a chance encounter and won't be noticed by others." Kai Zhongyang agreed. Chapter 4103. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other and sighed. The elder Tian we're talking about was the former vice island master of Middle Island, the Will of Heaven. He was also a legendary figure, but because he cultivated the Heaven's Fortune battle art, he went berserk, and his meridians were all broken. He became a cripple. "It's him?" Lin Yi was stunned. He remembered that Chancellor Nantian had mentioned this person in the secular world. "It seems like you've heard of him. Elder Tian has a close relationship with our master. Since then he has been staying in the Pill Hall to recuperate. Unfortunately there has been no effect. Part of the reason why master has been missing all these years is to find a way to treat him. When master isn't around, us brothers and sisters take care of him." Ho Guanqi explained. Kai Zhongyang continued, "That's why we had young hero Lin meet Tian Chan this time. Actually, we're using Elder Tian as a cover. Anyway, we've already invited doctors from outside to come in and treat Elder Tian, so no one will suspect anything." Thank you for the trouble. When do we go?" Lin Yi asked. Ho Guanqi chuckled and said, "Since little friend is so impatient, you can go over right now. Either way, I've already arranged for people ahead of time. The news will soon reach Tian Chan's ears. I believe she won't just sit and watch." After the three of them discussed, they immediately set off for the private recuperation place specially prepared for the Will of Heaven. Although Lin Yi was a little curious as to why Tian Chan was taking care of Elder Tian, he thought that it was probably a task assigned by the Pill Hall. Entering the room, he saw an old man with an imposing figure. He was in good spirits, and he could vaguely feel a trace of the heroic spirit he had in the past. However, between his brows, there was a lingering sense of helplessness and dejection. This was the first time Lin Yi saw the Will of Heaven, the legendary figure of Sky-class Island. He was now a cripple, and in terms of strength he might not even be a match for a normal person. However, a legend was still a legend. No matter how poor he was now, he wouldn't truly be ordinary. Seeing the three enter, the Will of Heaven didn't speak as harshly as he did to Tian Chan. Instead he smiled calmly, "Oh, it's Ho and Kai. Did you two bring me some elixir again? Or did you think of some other method? All these years, it wasn't just Zhang Liju Ho Guanqi and the other disciples didn't give up, they were always looking for a way to cure the disease, bringing back some rare herbs from time to time, but it was useless every time. No, actually, the two of us invited a medicine master to take a look at you, Elder Sky. Is Lin Yi our little friend? Ho Guanqi forced himself to explain. The will of heaven? When Qianxing heard this, his gaze fell on Lin Yi. He was a little surprised. This apothecary was a little too young, wasn't he? Although when one's strength reached a certain level, they wouldn't age. To an experienced person, even if it was just from a person's temperament, they would be able to determine the person's true age. He could also determine this person's true age. As a legendary figure in the past, Tianxing naturally did not lack this little bit of insight. However, although he could tell that Lin Yi was young, the will of heaven didn't underestimate him at all. After all, age and strength weren't necessarily proportional. Some people were young but they were geniuses. Their achievements in just a few years were something others wouldn't be able to achieve even if they spent hundreds or thousands of years. For example, he and Zhang Liju were both living examples. Plus, other than being an elixir god, Zhang Liju also had the identity of a medical saint. His disciples were all extraordinary as well. For example, Kai Zhongyang was a famous medical master in Zhongdao. This young elixir master in front of him was able to get their approval. He was probably not a simple person. This Lin Yi seemed to be quite capable. Then I'll have to trouble Elixir Lin. Please? The will of heaven politely invited Lin Yi to sit at the side. Looking at the will of heaven's expectant face, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other helplessly. Although they were here to help Lin Yi, they were actually using the will of heaven to trick people. Lin Yi wasn't an elixir master at all. He was just using this identity to make it easier for him to meet Tianchan. Elder Tian, actually Ho Guanqi was about to confess the truth to the will of heaven when suddenly, footsteps came from outside the door. A moment later, Tianchan appeared at the door with a face full of concern. Behind her was Zheng Tianchu, who refused to leave like a ghost. Everyone was surprised. It was expected that Tianchan would be attracted here, but what was with this Zheng Tianchu? Why was he here? Finally seeing Tianchan, Lin Yi was delighted. At the same time he was also puzzled. Who was this guy following behind her? His eyes were filled with lust. One look and you could tell that he wasn't a good person. On the other side, Tianchan's body shook as soon as she saw Lin Yi. She was also overjoyed, and it took a lot of effort for her not to show any strange expression. After all, Zheng Tianchu was following behind her, and if he knew about her relationship with Lin Yi, it would be big trouble. What are you doing here? Before everyone spoke, the will of heaven had already shouted at Tianchan, I have told you many times, don't come to see me, you are not welcome here. If it was in the past, Tianchan might have retreated, but now that she suddenly saw Lin Yi, she immediately understood that the other party must have used this reason to see her, and would not leave at this time. Senior Chan, just wants to see you and do my best. Tianchan immediately turned to Zheng Tianchu and said with a faint expression, Thank you for sending me off. I will go in to see the elder Tian. You can go back. Zheng Tianchu suddenly became anxious and quickly said, Don't, there are so many people here and there is a stranger I have never seen before. What if it is that, what if I told you about the flower thief before? After a pause, Zheng Tianchu immediately stared at Lin Yi with an evil face and asked, Who are you? You are not a disciple of Dan Hall, right? How did you sneak in here? Hurry up and tell me the truth. Before Lin Yi could speak, Ho Guanqi frowned and replied in a cold voice, This is the pharmacist we invited to diagnose the elder Tian. Zheng Tianchu, this is a major event related to the recovery of the elder Tian. Can you afford to offend the pharmacist? Chapter 4104. Do we need you to teach us how to do things? Zheng Tianchu, you don't think that just because you are Zheng Dongjue's grandson that you can be disrespectful to us. Ho Guanqi was enraged and released a strong aura, pressuring Zheng Tianchu to the point that he couldn't breathe. Zheng Tianchu felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on his head, and he was frightened. Because of the rise in his status, he had long forgotten that his grandfather Zheng Dongjue was only the vice-head of the alchemy hall, and the master of these two people in front of him, Zhang Liju, was the true master of the alchemy hall. Although he was seen as the future successor by Zheng Dongjue and had taken over Zheng Tianjie's position, even Zheng Tianjie didn't dare to show any disrespect to Ho Guanqi and the other disciples. After all, his grandfather didn't even dare to fart in front of these people's backing. Although Zheng Tianchu realized that he was a little too arrogant and wanted to retreat, he still didn't want to lose face in front of Tianchan. Zheng Tianchu didn't dare to talk back to Ho Guanqi, but he vented his anger on Lin Yi, pointing at him and threatening fiercely, "Humph, kid, do you know the consequences of coming to our alchemy hall to cheat? If you can't cure Elder Tian today, don't even think about walking out of here." Tian Chan heard this and panicked a little, defending Lin Yi. "Master Chu, what you said isn't appropriate, right? Elder Tian's illness is something that even Dan God can't do anything about. Even if this medicine master is skilled, how can he cure Elder Tian in one go? If you really do this, who would dare to come and treat Elder Tian in the future?" "Oh, sis-in-law, don't tell me you've fallen for this pretty boy?" Zheng Tianchu looked at Tian Chan and Lin Yi unkindly. He curled his lips and laughed coldly. "Sis-in-law, don't forget your identity. You are my cousin Zheng Tianjia's official wife. You are a member of House Zheng when you live, and a ghost of House Zheng when you die. Now you are siding with an outsider. What's the meaning of helping an outsider bully me, your brother-in-law?" Hearing this, Lin Yi secretly clenched his fist. If this wasn't the pill hall, he would definitely kill this Zheng Tianchu just because of these words. Even if they were forced into a ghost marriage, Tian Chan would always be Lin Yi's woman. This would never change. Zheng family? Who does he think he is? Since you want Tian Chan to be a ghost of the Zheng family after she dies, then I'll turn your Zheng family into a ghost first. Tian Chan was startled when she heard this, but she replied without batting an eyelid, "I'm just telling the truth. Young Master Chu, I advise you to think before you speak. Otherwise, if these ugly words were to spread, not only would my image be damaged, but the entire Zheng clan would also lose face." "Really? Alright, I'll see if he has the ability first. Don't forget that as a disciple of the pill hall, I also know medicine. If he really is an expert in medicine, then so be it. If he isn't, I'll be able to tell at a glance." Humph humph. Zheng Tianchu sneered and threatened. As he had always coveted Tian Chan, he could quickly detect any abnormal reaction from Tian Chan. His intuition told him that his sister-in-law seemed to have some inexplicable feelings towards this medicine master who popped out of nowhere. So today he must keep a close eye on this person. When Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang saw this, they couldn't help but feel anxious in their hearts. If they allowed Zheng Tianchu to stand here, not only would it affect Lin Yi and Tian Chan's meeting. More importantly, Lin Yi's identity as a medicine master would be exposed immediately. Once this matter got out of hand, even if they were Zhang Liju's disciples, it would be hard for them to protect Lin Yi. After all, their master Zhang Liju wasn't here, and the pill hall was under the vice hall master Zheng Dongjue's control. These disciples only had a high position, but they didn't have enough power to go against Zheng Dongjue. Moreover, if they were to really talk about this matter, they were the ones at fault first. At this moment, Lin Yi looked at Zheng Tianchu indifferently and said with a normal expression, "Is this the way your pill hall treats your guests? I was invited here to treat the will of heaven, not to be wronged. This person doesn't seem to welcome me." Ho Guanqi's eyes lit up and he immediately scolded, "Zheng Tianchu, did you hear that? Why aren't you leaving now?" Zheng Tianchu was furious when he heard this. As the grandson of Zheng Dongjue, his position in the pill hall was like the sun in the sky. He had never been scolded like this before. He pointed at the crowd and said, "You? How dare you?" Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Ho Guanqi. "I'll ask you one more time, are you going to leave or not? Treating Elder Tian's injury is something my master Dan God ordered. You're trying to disobey my master's order and betray the pill hall?" When the word betray came out, Zheng Tianchu couldn't help but shiver. With such a big accusation on him, no matter how strong his background was, he would still die. You. Zheng Tianchu gritted his teeth in anger, but under the stare of the two disciples of Zhang Liju, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, he didn't dare to be tough anymore. He could only snort coldly and angrily, "Fine, then I'll wait at the door. I'd like to see how you're going to clean up this mess. Sister-in-law, come with me." Zheng Tianchu was still worried about Tian Chan, and he reached out to hold her hand. However, Tian Chan nimbly dodged it and said indifferently, "No need, I'll stay here." Zheng Tianchu didn't dare to use force in front of everyone. Helplessly, he could only walk out the door alone. In the room, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang could only look at each other and smile bitterly. Although Zheng Tianchu had been driven out, this guy would definitely be guarding the door like a haunting ghost. The paper could not wrap up the fire, and when the time came he would still be exposed. The two of them did not know what to do for a while. At this moment, Lin Yi sat beside Tianxing calmly and gestured for him to extend his hand. Then Lin Yi started to feel Tianxing's pulse. He was acting like a doctor who had achieved the Tao. Tian Chan couldn't help but be surprised. Since when did Lin Yi become a medicine master, and was even invited by Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang to treat the will of heaven? However, being surprised was just being surprised. Tian Chan still had confidence in Lin Yi. She knew that Lin Yi's medical skills were superb when they were in the common world. Even if he couldn't completely cure the will of heaven, he should be able to diagnose something. Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, on the other hand, didn't know anything about this. They thought that Lin Yi was just putting on a show, and their expressions froze. Chapter 4105. Kai Zhongyang shrugged helplessly. After interacting with Lin Yi for the past few days, he felt that although the guy was young, he was reliable and reliable. Otherwise, the two wouldn't have become good friends. He really didn't expect things to turn out this way. It couldn't be helped. Since Lin Yi didn't want to say it, Kai Zhongyang felt like he had to force himself to say it for him. This was better than being exposed and being discovered by the Sky Elder himself. With all the effort they'd put into helping the Sky Elder all these years, he believed that the Sky Elder would be disappointed at most, and wouldn't pursue the matter too much. Kai Zhongyang knew that Jing Tianchu was guarding outside the door, and so he secretly used his strength to create an artificial barrier. It was invisible and hard to detect, but if one paid close attention, they would realize that standing at the door, they wouldn't be able to hear the sound inside the room. It had been blocked. Of course, this was only effective against Jing Tianchu. It wouldn't have any effect on higher-level masters. Immediately, Kai Zhongyang was ready to confess to the Sky Elder, but Lin Yi had already finished taking his pulse. He concluded with a surprised expression, "Sky Elder, your injuries? Not only are all the meridians in your body completely shattered, even the original meridians are starting to blur. This is really unprecedented, even gods can't heal you." Everyone froze at the same time. Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other, stunned. So this Lin Yi wasn't just putting on an act, he really did have some skills. Indeed, it was as Lin Yi said, the root cause of the Sky Elder's injuries was this: the shattered meridians. Different from Si Haixiao's broken meridians, even a miracle medicine like the meridian opening elixir wouldn't have any effect. This was the reason why Zhang Liju and the other disciples couldn't do anything about it. There was only one way to truly heal him, and that was to reconnect the broken meridians in his body bit by bit. This was an action that defied the laws of nature. Even Zhang Liju, who was known as the medical saint, didn't have such a terrifying ability. None of them had such a terrifying ability, and it was precisely because of this that the will of heaven's injuries had dragged on until now, leaving them helpless. After listening to Lin Yi's words, the will of heaven's heart sank. A trace of disappointment flashed across his eyes as he smiled bitterly. Even the gods can't cure it. This means that there's no cure at all. Tian Chan looked at Lin Yi. At the same time, he couldn't help but pray and desire. She also knew that if this kind of thing could be cured, then it could be cured. If it couldn't be cured, then it couldn't be cured. However, the will of heaven was an elder who was related to her by blood. She really couldn't bear to see him so helpless and depressed. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi shook his head and said with a smile, "That's not entirely true. Immortals are not omnipotent. There are things that immortals can't do. It's not necessarily impossible for us mortals." Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang couldn't help but look at each other. Their hearts that had just calmed down were instantly on tenterhooks for Lin Yi again. This was too big of a statement. How could he possibly have a way to deal with something that even his own master was helpless about? This little friend of his was really worrisome. The will of heaven's eyes lit up like a drowning man who had grabbed onto the last life-saving straw. He stared at Lin Yi and asked, "Could it be that you have a way to cure my injuries?" After waiting helplessly and desperately for so long, he wasn't afraid of Lin Yi bragging. Lin Yi didn't even dare to boast, not even daring to give it a try. That'd be the end of all hope. Lin Yi smiled faintly. To be honest, with Elder Tian's injuries, anyone else wouldn't have been able to hold on much longer. But a legend is a legend after all. Elder Tian is so energetic right now, it can be said that he's protecting your last chance of recovery. I can't say that I can completely cure you, but I'm willing to try. Lin Yi, little friend, this concerns Elder Tian's life. This isn't a child's play. You have to think this through. Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang quickly reminded him. Lin Yi's words were so convincing, but they still found it hard to believe. It wasn't because they looked down on Lin Yi, but because they cared for him. After all, even the holy Dr. Zhang Liju couldn't do anything, and a little kid like Lin Yi said that he could. That was too much of an exaggeration. However, the will of heaven interrupted the two. "It's fine, Alchemist Lin, go ahead and try. No matter what the result is, I believe it won't be worse than my current state. I will only be grateful and not blame you." "Alright then, let's start now." With that, Lin Yi grabbed his wrist and channeled the art of dragon mastery, starting the healing process. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were puzzled. What kind of healing method was this? Why did it look like he was checking the injury and not healing it? But seeing the solemn expression on Elder Tian's face, they didn't dare disturb himself. They could only watch worriedly from the sidelines. The only thing they could do now was to protect the two. Time passed bit by bit, and after a full 2 hours, Lin Yi slowly retracted his qi, the healing process finally coming to an end. Elder Tian, how do you feel? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang quickly asked. After sensing the situation in his body, Tian Xing's face suddenly filled with extreme shock. He looked at his right arm in disbelief and paled in shock. The meridians in my arm have actually recovered? Really? When Ho and Guanqi heard this, they were instantly shocked. However, they didn't need him to answer before they knew that Tian Xing's words were absolutely true. Because they noticed to their shock that the spiritual energy in the room had actually started to surge towards Tian Xing's right arm. As a legendary figure in Nakajima, the will of heaven's strength was undeniable, and he could control the qi in the air with a single thought. This was a skill that ordinary people couldn't comprehend, but it was a piece of cake for him. Of course, there was a prerequisite for this, and that was the recovery of his meridians. Elder Tian, you've really recovered? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, on the other hand, looked at Lin Yi as if they were looking at a monster. Treating the will of heaven was originally just an excuse, but they didn't think that it would turn out to be real. What was even more surprising was that the incurable disease that even their master Zhang Liju couldn't do anything about was actually cured by Lin Yi. The two couldn't help but think that this Lin Yi couldn't be some legendary figure in disguise, could he? Chapter 4106. Reconnect the meridians in my right arm? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were both stunned. Then they heard the will of heaven say excitedly, Medicine Master Lin is truly a genius. Even if you only help me reconnect the meridians in my right arm, it is already unimaginable. I cannot thank you enough, and I will remember it. You're too kind. This is the duty of a doctor. Lin Yi smiled faintly. In fact, if he really wanted to use his full strength, he could completely heal the other party. He just wanted to avoid shocking the world, so he was just testing his skills and healing a part of the other party's meridians. Even so, Lin Yi's image in everyone's eyes had suddenly become unfathomable. The will of heaven was extremely grateful. As for Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, they did not dare to treat Lin Yi as an ordinary junior anymore. Looking at this scene, Tian Chan was sincerely happy for Lin Yi and the will of heaven. One was the man she entrusted her life to, the other was a senior who was related to her by blood. Other than the will of heaven, she was the most excited person in her heart. However, she did not dare to show it too much. My friend Lin Yi, how did you do it? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were impatient and could not help but ask curiously. They were all divine doctors, and it was impossible for them not to feel an itch in their hearts when it came to healing the broken meridians, which was a nearly heaven-defying method. Seniors, you don't have to be curious. The reason why I can do this is because my mental cultivation method is a little special. Lin Yi smiled and then made a request. However, I hope that everyone can keep this method of treatment a secret. If you tell others, just say that acupuncture and medicinal pills are the treatment. My friend Lin Yi, don't worry. This is the top secret of our pill hall. Even if you don't say it, we will pay attention to it. Moreover, we won't tell others and no one will dare to ask us about it. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang guaranteed. That's good. Lin Yi nodded. This was related to the will of heaven, the former deputy master of Middle Island. Even if there was a slight leak, it would inevitably attract the attention of many big shots of Middle Island, even if one of them had ill intentions towards him. That would be a huge trouble. As the few of them were talking, Zheng Tianqiu finally couldn't help but push open the door. Immediately after, he saw Tian Xing's right arm condensing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He was so shocked that his jaw dropped. Kai Zhongyang removed the barrier without a trace and sneered at Zheng Tianqiu. What do you think? Now heaven has recovered an arm. Is this apothecary we invited a swindler? Zheng Tianqiu was speechless for a long time. Even if his medical skills were not as good as those present, but he grew up in the pill hall. Under the influence of what he saw and heard, his eyesight was still far above ordinary people. To be able to cure the will of heaven, even if it was just an arm, was definitely an incredible thing. If he still insisted that the other party was a swindler, then not only him, even his grandfather Zheng Dongjue, the deputy hall master of the pill hall, could not even compare to a swindler. He couldn't even compare to a swindler, so he could only go to the streets to beg. The truth was right in front of him. No matter how arrogant Zheng Tianqiu was, he did not dare to fart anymore. He could only force himself to ignore everyone and said to Tian Chan, Sister-in-law, you have seen heaven. Elder Tian, you've already seen it. Hurry up and follow me. Tian Shan shook her head decisively. No. Heaven has just recovered a little. Elder Sky has only just recovered a little. I have to stay behind to take care of him. You. Zheng Tianchu still wanted to forcefully pull Tian Shan away. However, under the intense stares of Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, especially at this moment, even the will of heaven was looking at him with hostility. This was a legendary figure who could be mentioned in the same breath as the pill god Zhang Liju. If he was at his peak, even his grandfather Zheng Dongjue could only look up to him. The situation was stronger than the person. Zheng Tianchu did not dare to act rashly again. He could only snort coldly and leave alone. After finally chasing this annoying dog skin plaster away, Hou Guanqi turned to Lin Yi and smiled. The annoying guy is gone. Lin Yi, little friend, if you have anything to say, you can say it now. Lin Yi nodded and immediately walked over and reached out to hold Tian Shan. However, before he could speak, the will of heaven was shocked and his face changed. When he saw that both Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang did not look surprised, he couldn't help but be surprised. Alchemist Lin, don't think that you can be like Zheng Tianchu and tease the Tian clan just because you cured me. The will of heaven was furious. Even if he had just recovered his right arm, he could already control part of the spiritual energy around him. He immediately pressed down on Lin Yi with a monstrous force. Huh. Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. While resisting the coercion of the other party, his eyes turned back and forth between the will of heaven and Tian Shan. He said with incredible surprise, Tian Shan, is this elder heaven from your family? However, Tian Shan did not immediately explain to him. Instead, she looked at the will of heaven with surprise and joy and said happily, Elder Heaven, you finally recognize me? The will of heaven sighed and looked at Tian Shan with a much gentler and kind gaze. He said, I am not a cold-hearted person. You have been caring for me for so long. How could I not see it? Moreover, my ancestors did move here from the heavenly elixir sect in the secular world. It was just that I never told anyone else. The reason why I didn't recognize you before was because I was a useless person. There was no need to claim kinship with you. What's there to recognize a disgusting disabled person? But now I have hope of recovery. Of course I can recognize you. That's great. Chan, was afraid that you would never recognize me. I have wanted to hear these words even in my dreams. Now my wish has finally come true. Tian Shan was both wronged and happy as she shed tears. You silly child. The will of heaven was also touched. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed. When he was at his lowest and most desperate, Tian Shan's concern was tantamount to sending charcoal in snowy weather. This was the true blood kinship that could not be cut off. The two finally recognized each other. However, Hou Guanqi and the others on the side were confused. Instead, Lin Yi heard some of the story from the will of heaven's words and asked, Xiao Chan, is Elder Heaven of the same lineage as the Tian clan in the secular world? Chapter 4107. Immediately, Tian Shan blushed and introduced to the will of heaven, Don't be angry, Tian Shan, and he were already. Without finishing her words, the will of heaven naturally understood what Tian Shan meant and he was stunned. Ah? You actually have this kind of relationship with Tian Shan, and you came up from the secular world together? Lin Yi was also surprised. I didn't expect that Tian Shan is actually a relative of Tian Shan. After the misunderstanding was solved, the will of heaven immediately dispersed his aura. Looking at Lin Yi's young face, he sighed, It's really true that the new generation excels the old. Lin Yi, your medical skills are already so brilliant at such a young age. It's really incredible. If I'm not wrong, you can actually cure me completely, but out of caution you held back just now, right? As soon as these words came out, Hou Guanqi and others were even more surprised. In their opinion, it was already very amazing that Lin Yi could cure the will of heaven's right arm, but he still held back? Under the gaze of everyone, Lin Yi couldn't lie, so he had to nod awkwardly. If he had known that the will of heaven was Tian Shan's relative, he wouldn't have held back so deliberately. Seeing this, everyone was even more shocked. Even Qianxing himself felt that it was unbelievable. He was just testing the waters. In theory, if Lin Yi could help him heal the meridians in his right arm, then naturally he could heal the meridians in other parts of his body. But theory was theory. To actually achieve it, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Without saying much, Lin Yi immediately began to heal the will of heaven again. After all, he was already on the same side, so he didn't have to worry too much and there was no need to hide so much. This time, Lin Yi didn't hold back anymore. It lasted for a full 8 hours, and it was not until the sky was almost dark that he finally succeeded. Feeling the new meridians in his body, the will of heaven was so shocked that he could not move. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth that he had instantly absorbed was transformed into genuine chi that flowed through his meridians. This kind of familiar feeling that he had not felt for a long time simply made him, a former legendary master, unable to extricate himself. Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were shocked speechless. Even his master, Zhang Liju, didn't have this kind of heaven-defying ability. Seniors, could I trouble you to examine Elder Tian and see if there are any hidden dangers in his body? Linny asked. It wasn't that he was being humble, although it seemed like there was no problem anymore. However, with Elder Celestial's previous level of strength, there might still be some undetectable side effects. Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were both medical masters with great experience, so they were suitable to help with the follow-up examination. Okay, Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang nodded. They were curious, and this kind of thing was something they couldn't refuse. While the two were giving the will of heaven a full examination, Lin Yi stood on the side and chatted with Tian Chan. He carefully learned about everything that had happened to Tian Chan recently. The result made Lin Yi both happy and annoyed. The happy thing was, although Tian Chan was forced into a ghost marriage, she didn't suffer any actual harm. Instead, she had an extra layer of protection. What annoyed him was that Zheng Dongjue and Zheng Tianchu were simply looking for death. Especially Zheng Tianchu. This scum was obviously trying to get his hands on Tian Chan, and this was intolerable. He had to find a chance in the future to nip this threat in the bud. While they were talking, Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang had finished the examination of the will of heaven, and they exclaimed, "My friend Lin Yi, your medical skills are really amazing. The meridians in Elder Celestial's body are no different from those of ordinary people. It's just that he was injured for a long time, and his body is still not used to it. As long as he has a good rest for a while, he should be able to recover." That's good. I was afraid that there would be some side effects. Lin Yi nodded and smiled. Hou Guanqi looked up at the sky outside and said to the will of heaven and Lin Yi, "Elder Celestial, it's getting late. Junior brother Kai and I have to go back to discuss the auction in Zhongdao, so we won't stay here for long. We'll see you tomorrow." Chan, we'll go back first. Elder Celestial, have a good rest. Tian Chan also said. After all, she was the daughter-in-law of the Zheng family, so she couldn't spend the night outside. Okay, then I won't see you out. The will of heaven nodded and then turned to Lin Yi and said, "Anyway, I live alone. How about you stay here for one night, Lin Yi, and chat with me?" Lin Yi was stunned. Since Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang still had business to discuss and didn't have time to arrange for him, he might as well stay here for one night. He immediately agreed and said, "Okay, then I'll bother you." Tian Xing laughed and said, "You are my great benefactor who has given me a new lease of life. To be willing to accompany an old man like me for a while is something I can't even beg for. What's there to be bothered about?" Everyone looked at each other and smiled. Lin Yi sent them out on behalf of the will of heaven. Before leaving, Tian Chan reluctantly hugged Lin Yi in his arms for a long time, and then they separated, saying that they would meet again the next morning. Back in the room, Lin Yi and the will of heaven sat opposite each other and chatted like old friends. Although the will of heaven had just recovered from his serious injury, he was in a good mood and was in the mood to talk. After so many years of illness, he was suddenly cured, and it was the time to share the joy. "Elder Celestial, please forgive me for being curious, but how did you get this injury? It's really rare to see your meridians damaged to this extent." Lin Yi asked. Hearing this, the will of heaven sighed and said, "You must have heard about the creation battle art. My meridians were damaged because I cultivated this creation battle art." Creation battle art. Lin Yi was shocked when he heard this. Listening to the will of heaven's words, could it be that the rumor was true, that cultivating the creation battle art would really make one useless? One should know that what he was cultivating now was the creation battle art. It was just that he had modified it with the art of dragon mastery as the basis. Yes, the creation battle art is a cultivation method passed down from ancient times, but for most people, it's a set of useless cultivation methods that can't be cultivated at all. No one will take it seriously, and no one will cultivate this creation battle art that has become a laughing stock. Except for people like me who come from a tribe of cultivators, there's no other choice. The will of heaven's face had a look of reminiscence and regret as he spoke. Lin Yi was slightly stunned. He had never heard of this legendary figure. The will of heaven was actually a grassroots cultivator. Chapter 4108. His words were flat, but Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. There were very few people who could do this even though they knew it was impossible. It could only be said that there was a reason why Tianxing was able to become a legend of his generation. Gradually, I found that although the progress of the creation battle art was slow, my strength was extremely strong. I was invincible at the same level and could even kill opponents at a higher level. When I broke through to the Nascent Soul stage, I was recognized as the strongest Nascent Soul stage master on Heavenly Island. Because I had the strength to kill opponents at a higher level, I finally became the Vice Island Master of Middle Island. For a time I was very famous. The Will of Heaven narrated without joy or sorrow. Since the creation battle art is so powerful, then, Elder Heaven, how did you end up like this? Linny couldn't help but ask curiously. The Will of Heaven shook his head. Although I had become the strongest Nascent Soul stage master at that time, there was still a higher stage above the Nascent Soul stage. Of course, I was not willing to stop like this. However, when I was ready to break through to the Nascent Soul stage, I found that I couldn't cultivate anymore. At the Nascent Soul stage, besides me, no one else practiced the creation battle art, so there was no precedent to follow. I could only rely on my own strength to break through, but in the process of breaking through, my meridians were all broken. After listening to this, Linny suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He was also practicing the creation battle art, and it was the same experience as the Will of Heaven. He could kill opponents at a higher level easily and happily. According to what the Will of Heaven said, when he broke through to the Nascent Soul stage, he would also end up like this? Although he was still far from the Nascent Soul stage, let alone breaking through, if he continued to develop like this, it was only a matter of time. After not hearing Lin Yi's response for a long time, the Will of Heaven suddenly saw his frightened expression dripping with cold sweat. He couldn't help but feel strange. What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? That's not it. It's just that after listening to Elder Heaven's words, I felt something in my heart. Lin Yi smiled bitterly and shook his head. Feeling something? The Will of Heaven was stunned. Suddenly, his body shuddered and he turned pale with fright. Don't tell me you also cultivate a creation battle art? To tell you the truth, that is indeed the case. Lin Yi nodded frankly and didn't hide anything, even though it was the first time he came into contact with the Will of Heaven. But with the relationship of Tian Chan in front of him, he could be considered half one of them. What's more, he didn't have much confidence right now. He needed to learn more about the creation battle art from the Will of Heaven so that he wouldn't follow in his footsteps. After all, even if the Will of Heaven's meridians were shattered, he could still save him. However, if something were to happen to him, he could only sit there and wait for death. The Will of Heaven gasped and quickly said, "Then please stop. We are all cultivating in the wrong way." Wrong? What? Linny was stunned. After listening to the words just now, he only felt that this cultivation method was risky, but it shouldn't be completely wrong. Otherwise, whether it was the Will of Heaven or himself, they were all invincible at the same level. They were all invincible existences of the same level and could even kill those of a higher level. How was this possible? The Will of Heaven carefully looked at Lin Yi from head to toe again before he slowly said, "Let me ask you first. What is the Heavenly Tao? Isn't it the pursuit of a higher realm? Above the Heaven stage is the Foundation Establishment, after the Foundation Establishment is the Gold Core, and even the higher realm after that is the Heavenly Tao." Lin Yi answered without hesitation. The Will of Heaven shook his head and said, "No, the real Heavenly Tao is cultivation. Go against the heaven and finally achieve the Great Tao. This is the real Heavenly Tao." Yes, isn't this what we have been cultivating in pursuit of? Lin Yi asked curiously. When he first came to Heaven Stage Island, he had heard people mention the word cultivation. At that time he didn't pay much attention to it. He thought it was just a new way of saying it after reaching the new realm of Foundation Establishment. No. What we are cultivating now is not the Heavenly Tao. At best, it can only be called a pseudo-Heavenly Tao. Its essence is to replace the Heavenly Tao with martial arts. Although there are also Foundation Establishment, Gold Core, Nascent Soul, and other realms, they are not real cultivation. They can only be regarded as martial arts cultivation, a way to replace the Heavenly Tao. The Will of Heaven shook his head repeatedly. Martial arts cultivation? Heavenly Tao cultivation? What does that mean? Lin Yi couldn't help but be confused. In the past, he had to rely on himself to figure it out. This was the first time he heard someone talk about these things seriously. Don't you understand? In order to let more people set foot on the Heavenly Tao, as early as the ancient times, there were great predecessors of Heaven Stage Island who changed the Heavenly Tao cultivation method into a lower threshold of martial arts cultivation. Although martial arts cultivation can obtain a stronger body and better skills, in the end, it is still a pseudo-Heavenly Tao. The strength of martial arts cultivators will be very strong in the early stage, but later on, they will be much weaker than the real cultivators, and there is a huge essential difference between them. The Will of Heaven patiently explained. Elder Heaven, What is the essential difference that you are referring to? Lin couldn't help but ask. It's very simple. Martial arts cultivation, the final strength obtained is martial arts, while heavenly Tao cultivation, the final strength obtained is divine sense. The will of heaven had a fascinated look on his face. So that's how it is. It was only then that Lin finally understood. His brain felt as if it was filled with wisdom. Qianxing's guidance made his originally blurry understanding clear immediately. However, Lin was still a little puzzled. Even if there was a difference between martial arts cultivation and heavenly Tao cultivation, almost everyone walked the path of martial arts cultivation, but he had never heard of anyone who was a real cultivator. In other words, the real heavenly Tao cultivation almost didn't exist anymore. The will of heaven's sudden mention of this was a little inexplicable. Tianxing saw through Lin Yi's confusion and said solemnly, I'm telling you all this because I want to tell you that the art of creation is a true practitioner's art. This is a legend passed down from the ancient times. It's not wrong and it's not lying to us. It's just that not many people can practice it, and even if they do, they'll end up like me, practicing it wrong. Cultivating in the wrong direction? Lin Yi was stunned again, but combined with the words just now, he could roughly understand something. Elder Heaven, do you mean that this is supposed to be a heavenly Tao cultivation art, but in the end, you used it as a martial arts cultivation art? Chapter 4109. Lin Yi could understand this. Anyone would be able to understand the meaning of these words. However, it was useless. Only by truly comprehending this point would one be able to defy the heavens and become a saint. Although I can still cultivate in my current state and I'm far more powerful than ordinary people, every breakthrough is very dangerous. If I'm not careful, my meridians will break. Especially when I broke through to the nascent soul stage last time, my meridians were all broken. The will of heaven said with lingering fear. Lin Yi was stunned. He had also cultivated the creation battle art, but he had never encountered this problem. Could it be because of the art of dragon mastery? This creation battle art originally had a flaw, but the art of dragon mastery was an all-purpose mantra. Therefore, when the two were combined and he modified it, the original flaw disappeared. Thinking about it, it was indeed possible, but judging from Tianxing's words, Lin Yi understood that this was probably a method that had no other way. The true way to train in the art of creation wasn't like what he was doing now. The art of dragon mastery only allowed him to train it, and to a certain extent, it acted as a substitute. That was all. However, after understanding this, Lin Yi wasn't too worried, nor was he in a hurry to figure out the true cultivation method of the art of dragon mastery. After all, no matter how good the art of dragon mastery was, it was still an additional cultivation method. The art of dragon mastery was Lin Yi's true foundation. Since he could cultivate it now, he could just take it one step at a time. Why bother worrying so much? As for Qianxing, Lin Yi didn't plan on giving him the arts he'd modified with the art of dragon mastery. After all, they'd only met for a day, and even with Tianchan, even so, it wasn't to the point where they could exchange their lives for each other's. Let's wait and see for now. Lin Yi, when you broke through to the Foundation Establishment realm from Heaven Rank Great Circle, did you encounter any danger like I did? The Will of Heaven asked with concern. Lin Yi shook his head. That's not true. At that time it felt quite smooth. It wasn't as dangerous as the meridians you mentioned just now. That's strange. Back then I was in grave danger. The Will of Heaven looked at Lin Yi in surprise and then said thoughtfully, but even if it's the same mental cultivation method, it varies from person to person. Or maybe it's because the level of Heaven stage great perfection is too low. When you break through from the Foundation Establishment realm to the Golden Core realm, you may feel a certain amount of pain. Maybe. Lin Yi responded non-committally. The creation battle art that he cultivated and the original version of the Will of Heaven were two different things. The experience of the Will of Heaven might not happen to him. What would happen would only be known when the time came. The pain is not the most important thing. You can grit your teeth and endure it. The biggest problem is that it's very likely to be like me. Every time I break through, my meridians can't bear the huge impact of true chi and explode. That's really fatal. You must take it as a warning. Be mentally prepared in advance. The Will of Heaven warned. Lin Yi nodded and didn't say anything else. Seeing him like this, the Will of Heaven knew that he couldn't persuade him. He didn't continue to persuade him. For cultivators, strength was more important than life. Even if they knew that it was dangerous to continue to cultivate, very few people would stop halfway. Back then, Tianxing himself was like this. Even when others advised him not to practice. When others advised him not to practice, he insisted on practicing. Although his strength had not fully recovered, at least there was hope. Now that there was hope, his first thought was to cultivate. Even he who had encountered such a big setback was like this, let alone Lin Yi. Since he couldn't persuade Lin Yi, the will of heaven simply told Lin Yi about his cultivation experience over the years, bit by bit. He tried to let Lin Yi have a reference in the future cultivation process so that even if he encountered danger, he could be prepared. Cultivation experience, especially the cultivation experience of a legendary master like the will of heaven, was a real priceless treasure no matter where it was. It was a good thing that couldn't be bought with spirit jades. The will of heaven was so generous to share it with Lin Yi. It was also a disguised form of repayment. After all, Lin Yi was a great benefactor who was like a second parent to him. Of course, the relationship between Lin Yi and Tianchan was also an important reason. Otherwise, the will of heaven would at most do something for Lin Yi in return, and it was impossible for him to teach so wholeheartedly. The two talked through the night until the sky was bright. They didn't feel tired at all. Instead, they talked even more excitedly. The will of heaven looked at the sky outside and suggested to Lin Yi, "Accompany me out for a walk. How about we continue to talk while walking? Speaking of which, I haven't walked out of this room for many years. I don't know if there are any changes outside now." Lin Yi smiled. "I wouldn't dare disobey." The two immediately went out side by side and walked in the courtyard of the pill hall. They talked and laughed and were full of interest. It immediately attracted the attention of many pill hall disciples. The will of heaven was a genuine legendary figure. It was impossible to see him normally. Moreover, they always knew that this person had become a useless person. They didn't expect him to actually go out and walk today. It seemed that he had completely recovered. The news that the former deputy island master of Middle Island, the legendary figure the will of heaven had recovered, spread like wildfire. Almost in a short period of time, it spread throughout the pill hall. Very soon Lin Yi saw Tianchan, who rushed over after hearing the news. However, when they saw Zheng Tianchu, who appeared behind Tianchan, their expressions suddenly turned cold. This haunting asshole. Zheng Tianchu looked at the will of heaven, who seemed to have been reborn, and couldn't help but say in disbelief, "You, Elder Heaven, you have recovered?" At the same time he asked this, there was a sudden commotion around. The person who came this time was actually the person with the highest authority in the pill hall, the deputy hall master of the pill hall, Zheng Dongjue. The will of heaven glanced at Zheng Tianchu and deliberately raised his voice. He said to everyone around him, "Tianchan is my Tian family's sister in the secular world. In the future she will be the will of heaven's relative. Those who have ill intentions towards her, pay attention. Otherwise, if you really provoke my sister, I will definitely not be polite. I believe you have heard of my decisive deeds. Behave yourselves." Chapter 41:10. Tianchan was surprised and happy at the moment. Although the will of heaven had acknowledged her yesterday, there was no clear relationship. But now, the will of heaven was her brother, a super backer that no one dared to belittle. Among the crowd, only Zheng Tianchu's face was ashen. He was so angry that he gritted his teeth. Of course, he knew that the will of heaven's words were directed at him. This old man had just recovered from his injury and his strength was far from his peak. But with his genius cultivation, it was only a matter of time before he recovered his strength. In the face of the will of heaven at his peak, not to mention Zheng Tianchu, even his grandfather Zheng Dongjue would have to give way to him. Originally, with the gradual consolidation of his position as a young master, Zheng Tianchu felt that it was a piece of cake to get his hands on Tianchan, his beautiful sister-in-law. In the end, he didn't expect that the will of heaven's words would directly seal all hope. This old fart. But even so, Zheng Tianchu didn't dare to bear a grudge against the will of heaven. It was useless even if he bore a grudge. If he really provoked the will of heaven could kill him as easily as crushing an ant. The only person he could bear a grudge against was Lin Yi, who cured the will of heaven. Noticing Zheng Tianchu's resentful and cold eyes, Lin Yi smiled faintly. For him now, as long as Zheng Tianchu didn't use any insidious means against Tianchan, there was no substantial threat. His strength was far inferior to his dead cousin Zheng Tianjie. How could this kind of trash fight with him? On the other side, Zheng Dongjue, who had just arrived, looked at his grandson with a deep meaning. Recently, Zheng Tianchu had been pestering Tianchan. He had heard about it, but he didn't intend to stop it. Anyway, he let Tianchan and Zheng Tianjie have a ghost marriage. The purpose was just to take revenge on Tianchan. Now, even if he let another grandson take advantage of it, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, in the past it was just a matter of a few words. Now that the will of heaven had publicly announced that he would support Tianchan, Zheng Dongjue couldn't act rashly for the time being. After all, the legend of the will of heaven was still there. No matter what, Zheng Dongjue had to weigh his options carefully. At the very least, he couldn't afford to fall out with a legendary figure like the Will of Heaven before he had a clear understanding of the Will of Heaven's strength. Thinking of this, Zheng Dongjue immediately congratulated him with a face full of joy. Old Heaven, you've recovered from your injuries just like a dragon returning to the sea or a tiger returning to the forest. It's just a matter of time before you regain your former glory. Congratulations. The Will of Heaven smiled and said, You flatter me, Vice Hall Master Zheng. Glory or not, it's all in the past. For me, everything is starting from the beginning. At this time, Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang came from afar. Zheng Dongjue saw them and said, Little Ho, Celestial Elder's recovery is such a joyous occasion. Why don't you think of a way to tell Hall Master Zhang? These words were meant to test the waters. Zheng Dongjue had never been willing to be under anyone, but to ask him to go against Zhang Liju. He didn't even have the guts to do so, let alone the ability. The only chance he had was that Zhang Liju wasn't around all year round. But even so, he only dared to do some small things, afraid that Hou Guanqi's disciples had some secret way of contacting Zhang Liju. Otherwise, if Zhang Liju caught him in the act, he'd be done for. Hou Guanqi didn't say anything. He replied without missing a beat, Vice Hall Master Zheng, my Sifu is very secretive. It's not easy to find him, but I'll try my best to send a message. When he receives it, he'll come back naturally. Zheng Dongjue nodded and looked at Lin Yi. This must be Alchemist Lin, right? Since you've healed our Celestial Elder's injury, you're the savior of the Hall of Elixir. If you have any requests, we'll definitely do it. These words were very passionate, but Lin Yi could hear the perfunctory tone in it. He smiled faintly, if there's a need in the future, I won't hesitate to help. But I'm still a freelancer right now, and following Master Kai is already a rare opportunity for me to learn and train. Is that so? To be able to cure a terminal illness like Celestial Elders, that would be an earth-shattering news. Alchemist Lin, aren't you being too humble? Zheng Dongjue blinked his eyes and pretended to praise him. I wouldn't dare, I'm just speaking the truth. I sincerely want to learn from Master Kai, Lin Yi said faintly. Upon hearing this, Zheng Dongjue sized up Lin Yi once more. This guy looked very normal and he was ridiculously young. From his tone, he didn't sound like a powerful alchemist at all. From what Zheng Dongjue could see, this Lin Yi just happened to have a special prescription for the Will of Heaven, and that's why he was able to cure it. If his medical skills were as good as Zhang Liju's, he would have been famous on the Five Islands long ago. Why would he need to learn from Kai Zhongyang? He clearly wasn't some powerful character. After coming to this conclusion, Zheng Dongjue didn't care about Lin Yi anymore. He didn't care about this country bumpkin that popped out of nowhere. He said faintly, if that's the case, Lil Kai, please help me take care of this alchemist Lin. Take him to eat something to express your gratitude. I still have things to do, so I won't be accompanying you guys. The rest of you, don't you have to work? With that, Zheng Dongjue put his hands behind his back like a master and left with Zheng Tianqiu. The rest of the disciples from the Hall of Elixir also left. This old bastard really knew how to act. Lin Yi and the Will of Heaven looked at each other, their eyes filled with mockery and mockery. After coming to Heaven Class Island for so long, Lin Yi had seen quite a few big shots. Whether it was Shanghai Tianhua in the north, or the Will of Heaven in front of him, their auras were all naturally admirable. Only this Vice Hall Master Zheng's aura was fake, and no matter where he went he always looked like Kong Ming Ming. It really made people speechless. Since this master has spoken, Elder Heaven, Lin Yi, young friend, why don't we go out for a meal? Hou Guanqi teased with a smile. That's alright, I wanted to go out for a breather too. Let's go find a place outside. The Will of Heaven nodded with a smile. Then let's go to Five Elements Commerce. There won't be too many people there and we can talk without worry. Kai Zhongyang suggested. Chapter 41:11. Of course, Lin Yi and the others had no objection to this. They immediately prepared the car and went out together. On the other side, after Zheng Dongjue took Zheng Tianqiu to a secluded place, he suddenly stopped and said in a dignified tone, are you interested in Tianchan? Zheng Tianqiu was shocked and his face instantly turned pale. Coveting his brother's sister-in-law was a serious crime. He quickly begged for mercy, Grandpa, I know I was wrong. I was just momentarily blinded by greed. I won't dare to do it again. Don't dare? Why not? Since I chose you as my heir, everything will be yours in the future. She's just a woman. What's there to be afraid of? Zheng Dongjue changed his tone. Grandpa, what do you mean? Zheng Tianqiu was stunned. Don't you understand? You're my grandson. Whether you have feelings for Tianchan or not, I won't stop you. Zheng Dongjue patted him on the shoulder. Zheng Tianqiu was overjoyed. He didn't expect Zheng Dongjue to have such an attitude. But after thinking about it carefully, in the cultivation world, strength was king. He was a big shot who would inherit the Zheng family in the future. It seemed that it was not a big deal to covet Tianchan, however, don't provoke her in the near future. The will of heaven was a troublesome existence in Zhongdao. You can't act rashly until you know whether his strength has fully recovered. As for the matter of Tianchan, I will find a way to fulfill your wish. Do you understand? Zheng Dongjue reminded him. Yes, I understand. I will listen to Grandpa's orders in the future. Zheng Tianchu nodded repeatedly and was overjoyed. In a quiet private room in Five Elements Commerce, Lin Yi and others sat at a table. Because there were no outsiders, Lin Yi could sit with Tianchan without worry. On the other side of him sat the Will of Heaven. Opposite them were Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang. Lin Yi originally wanted to call Sydney over, but when he walked to the door, he found that Sydney was cultivating in seclusion, so he didn't want to disturb her. Anyway, these people were all here, so it was the same to introduce them later. When the dishes were ready, the Will of Heaven toasted Lin Yi first and said happily, "Brother Lin Yi, since you and my sister Tianchan are Dao companions, then I will call you brother." Lin Yi was shocked. He hurriedly said, "Elder Heaven, you're my senior, I'm not worthy. If I say you deserve it, then you deserve it." The Will of Heaven waved his hand and said, "You cured my terminal illness, and your kindness is like giving me a new life. Without you, I would still be a useless person. So, I'm your big brother now because of Tianchan." When Lin Yi heard this, he could only smile and nodded. He didn't say anything more. After all, in the world of cultivation, the strong were respected. Age was never important, strength and ability were the key. At this time, Kai Zhongyang also raised his glass and toasted Lin Yi. He pretended to complain and said with a smile, "Speaking of which, young hero Lin, you're really not kind at all. You have such brilliant medical skills, but you didn't tell us at all. You made us worry for nothing." "That's right, little friend Lin Yi, you really lied to us." Hou Guanqi also smiled and echoed. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile and said, "I already have medical skills. I already knew it when I was in the secular world. It's just that I didn't see Big Brother Heaven's injury before, so I didn't have the confidence. I only dared to try after seeing it. I didn't mean to hide it from the two of you." "Didn't you know that Brother Lin Yi's medical skills were profound? Then why did you find him to treat my injury?" The Will of Heaven was shocked. Kai Zhongyang and Hou Guanqi looked at each other and explained, "Elder Heaven, actually young hero Lin's purpose of going to the pill hall this time was to see Tianchan. As for asking the medicine master to treat your injury, it was actually just an excuse. In the end, we didn't expect him to actually treat your injury." The Will of Heaven instantly laughed and patted Lin Yi's shoulder. "This is fate. Come, for fate, let's cheers." They were all on the same side, so they gathered together to drink and chat. Naturally, they were in high spirits and happy. However, when they were about to finish eating, Lin Yi was a little worried and said, "That Jing Tianchu is plotting against Xiao Chan. I'm a little worried about letting Xiao Chan stay in the pill hall like this." "It's okay. I'm here. Tianchan is my sister. No matter how bold that kid is, he won't dare to do anything." The Will of Heaven immediately patted his chest and said, "It's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but it's hard to guard against a stab in the dark. This guy is a sinister villain. With Big Brother Heaven here, he naturally won't dare to do anything, but I'm afraid that he will play some tricks." Lin Yi listened and shook his head. "That's right. Jing Tianchu is a very wretched person. Before Jing Tianjie died, he didn't dare to be too arrogant, but he often did some wretched things. Now that he has Jing Dongjue's support, we still have to be careful." Hou Guanqi nodded in agreement. With that said, the Will of Heaven was in a difficult position. Although he could take care of Tianchan, he couldn't watch her every moment. After all, his injuries had just healed and he needed time to recover his strength. He couldn't keep showing his face outside. "With your face, Big Brother Heaven, can you bring Xiao Chan out to establish her own sect? At least, can you let her not stay in the pill hall?" Lin Yi suddenly asked. Now that Zhang Liju wasn't here, Jing Dongjue could do whatever he wanted in the pill hall. Even with the Will of Heaven's words to protect Tianchan, the Will of Heaven wasn't a member of the pill hall. If Zheng Dongjue really wanted to do something, an outsider like him might not be able to do anything. The best way was naturally to let Tianchan leave the pill hall as soon as possible. As long as she could establish her own sect, Zheng Dongjue wouldn't be able to do anything. If something really happened, the Will of Heaven could intervene without any hesitation. It shouldn't be a problem. Since Tianchan is my sister, I'll bring her out. Even that old man Jing Dongjue wouldn't dare say anything. Linny bro, just wait for my good news. The will of heaven thought about it and said. The will of heaven was a decisive man. After making up his mind, he brought Tian-chan back to the pill hall. After all, he was making the decision for Tian-chan. Even if the will of heaven came forward, Tian-chan herself would still have to go back and express her stance. This big brother of his was quite confident. Linny sighed. If it was someone else, they would have to be mentally prepared and hesitate before dealing with Zheng Dongjue, the vice head of the pill hall. Chapter 41:12. The will of heaven left with Tian-chan, while Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang continued to go out to prepare for the auction in Zhongdao. Only Lin Yi turned around and went back to his room. Sensing Lin Yi's return, Sydney immediately stopped her cultivation and hurriedly greeted him. She asked with concern, "How is Tian-chan?" "Sydney, don't worry. Everything is going well." Lin Yi immediately smiled and told her what happened in the past 2 days. After listening to Tian-chan, Shueli was not jealous at all. Instead, she sincerely thought for Tian-chan and said, it would be great if Tian-chan could really move out of the alchemy department. With Zheng Dongjue suppressing her from above and Jing Tianchu pestering her from below, the alchemy department has become a troublesome place for her. If she continues to stay there, she will get into trouble sooner or later. Yes, that's why I asked Brother Tian to talk about this. Lin Yi nodded in agreement. He looked up and down at Sydney and suddenly had an idea. If Tian-chan could really come out and start her own business, it would be a good choice to let her be with Sydney. After all, according to the previous consideration, it was actually a very troublesome thing to bring Sydney back to the North Island. Judging from Sydney's performance, she did not reject Tian-chan. The two women should be able to get along well. However, this was just a sudden idea. It was not mature yet and he did not know how to operate it. Moreover, it was still unknown whether Tian-chan could successfully escape. At this stage, this idea could only be thought in his mind. Lin Yi did not say it out loud. However, what Lin Yi did not expect was that the will of heaven was extremely efficient. He had just talked to Sydney, and the sky was not even dark, and the will of heaven had already returned with Tian-chan. When the door opened, Tian-chan and Sydney happened to meet each other, and they suddenly sighed with emotion. Before this, the two of them were transmitted from the secular world to Zhongdao. Although they knew each other, they were not too familiar with each other, and there was no obvious intersection. But now, the two of them were together because of Lin Yi. When they met again, they had a kind of intimate feeling like sisters reuniting. Not to mention the experience of the two women in the secular world, after coming to Heaven Stage Island, it could be said to be full of ups and downs. One was forced in Alchemy Hall. The other was bullied and humiliated in Snow Sword Sect, and they were both in the same predicament. Because of their relationship with Lin Yi, the two women held hands and talked about their experiences on Heaven Stage Island together. They had a common language and they quickly became closer to each other. In a short while, the two women already called each other sisters and chatted happily. Brother Lin Yi, you are really lucky. You enjoy the happiness of having two wives. Others are envious. The will of heaven looked at this scene and joked. Although he was Tian-chan's elder brother, Heaven Stage Island was not like the secular world. As long as one was strong, it was normal for him to have lovers all over the world. He would not be dissatisfied because Lin Yi had other women. On the contrary, in the opinion of him and Hou Guanqi, for a genius like Lin Yi, if he only had Tian-chan as his cultivation partner, it would be strange. That would be really strange. Whether it was Tian-chan or Sydney, they were both great beauties with unparalleled beauty. Lin Yi was able to make them give their hearts to him. This luck was indeed enviable. Even the will of heaven, a cultivation maniac who wholeheartedly pursued the heavenly law, could not help but sigh. What he did not know was that none of Lin Yi's other lovers were any less beautiful than the two women. When all the women were together in the future, they would be the true winners in life. It is indeed my luck to be able to meet them in this life. Lin Yi looked at this gratifying scene and nodded emotionally. He did not expect that the relationship between the two women would be so harmonious. However, he could guess that the two women were so close to each other. Although it was because of their congenial personalities, there was another reason, and that was because they cared about his feelings. After all, from Lin Yi's point of view, if the two women still quarreled with each other in the current situation, it would be a headache for him. But brother Lin Yi, I still have to spoil the mood by saying this. Although it is enviable to have multiple lovers, you should not only envy the lovebirds but not the fairies. Don't slack off in your cultivation. The will of heaven warned. The land of beauties was the grave of heroes. Throughout the ages, there were countless geniuses who had outstanding talents, but they wasted their time in the land of beauties and finally became ordinary. The will of heaven sincerely regarded Lin Yi as one of his own. He did not want to see such a tragedy happen to Lin Yi. Brother Heaven, don't worry. I am very clear that strength is king. If I am not strong enough, no matter how many beauties I have, I can't protect them. Therefore, for me they are not obstacles on the path of cultivation. Instead, they are the motivation for me to continue to improve. Lin Yi said with a smile. Indeed. Femme fatale is not a lie. Although their unparalleled beauty is your fortune, they are just like that Jing Tianqiu, always attracting all sorts of trouble. Only with great power can you truly protect them. Tianxing nodded. That's right. You're right. You're right. By the way, Brother Heaven, why are you so fast? Have you settled Jing Dongjue's side? Lin Yi turned to ask. Of course. Jing Dongjue won't dare to say no. The Will of Heaven laughed out loud. Tianxing laughed heartily. I've already seen through him. That guy is a classic example of someone who bullies the weak and fears the strong. If I had lowered my voice and discussed things with him, he might have taken advantage of me. But this time, when I went over and told him that Tianchan is my sister and I'm going to take her out to start her own family, what do you think he did? What did he do? Lin Yi asked curiously. That old man was frightened by me on the spot. After holding it in for a long time, he finally said, since this is your family's matter, I will naturally leave it up to you to decide. Aha, just thinking about that ugly, bitter face of his is hilarious. Tianxing laughed loudly. That Deputy Hall Chief Zheng, maybe he is temporarily not clear about your strength. He doesn't dare to openly offend you, the legendary Deputy Island Master of Middle Island. He is full of tricks, but he doesn't have the courage to openly offend you, so he can only give in. Lin Yi also smiled. Chapter 41:13. Humph, Jing Dongjue, this old man has already lost his drive to improve. He can only stop here. There's no possibility for him to improve further. Even if I haven't recovered my strength, I don't need to care about trash like him. The Will of Heaven curled his lips and looked at him disdainfully. As he spoke, he still couldn't hide his arrogance and overbearingness from when he was dominating Heaven Stage Island. But this kind of person can't do anything right. Even if he can't become a big problem, he's still a threat. Brother Tian, it's better for you to pay attention. Lin Yi reminded. Brother Lin Yi, don't worry. I know this. The Will of Heaven smiled indifferently. He turned to look at the two girls who were chatting intimately and asked, speaking of which, what do you plan to do with the two of them? Are you going to stay in Five Elements Commerce forever? Five Elements Commerce had Kai Zhongyang's protection. It wasn't impossible to continue staying here. However, the Will of Heaven could tell that living under someone else's roof wasn't Lin Yi's style. Moreover, Five Elements Commerce was still a part of Pill Hall. If that was the case, it would go against the original intention of letting Tianchan establish her own sect. I'm also considering this. Brother Tian, do you have any good suggestions? Lin Yi asked. If you want to stay in Middle Island with them, there are only two choices. One is to join a sect, and the other is to establish your own sect. However, you don't even consider Pill Hall. I don't think you have any intention of joining a sect, right? The Will of Heaven asked. Of course. Tianchan and Sydney were bullied and oppressed in their own sect. If they join another sect, it's hard to guarantee that it won't happen again. So, I can only choose the latter. Lin Yi nodded. If that's the case, Brother Lin Yi, you can consider starting a small business. Although it's hard for an ordinary person to establish a foothold in Middle Island, you have us as your backing. It's not like you don't have any background. If it's just a small business, it shouldn't be a problem to establish a foothold. The Will of Heaven suggested. That's fine. Hearing this, Lin Yi's eyes lit up. This way, not only would he be able to settle down the two girls, he would also be able to earn some spirit jades, killing two birds with one stone. Then he rubbed his chin and pondered, but what kind of business should I start? The two most popular products on the Heaven Stage Island are elixirs and heavenly treasures. The latter is highly dependent on the source of goods, so it won't be easy to get on the right track in a short period of time. However, elixirs are definitely in short supply, and it just so happens that Tianchan is an alchemist. If you need it, you can also purchase from Little Kai. I think it will be a good way to go. The Will of Heaven analyzed for him. The reason why the Middle Island Alchemy Hall could have such a high position today, and why the Five Elements Commerce could sit firmly on the throne of the Commerce Alliance is number one, in the end, it was all because of the great influence of pills. In the five great islands of the Heaven rank, this was a hard currency that was even more reliable than spiritual jades. No matter who it was, no one would complain about having too many medicinal pills, especially high-quality medicinal pills. If that's the case, we can really open a shop that specializes in selling medicinal pills. The more Lin Yi thought about it, the more he felt that this was a good idea. If they really opened a shop, in fact there was no need to look for Kai Zhongyang to purchase goods. Not only was Tian Chan an alchemist, he himself was also an alchemist, and in terms of quality he was absolutely superb. At that time he would let Tian Chan refine some common medicinal pills, and Lin Yi himself would specialize in refining some superb medicinal pills, which should be enough to meet the needs of the shop. Tian Chan and Sydney, who were on the side, heard Lin Yi and the Will of Heaven's words, came over and nodded in agreement. Okay, let's open an elixir shop together, this is a good idea. Since both of you agree, then it's decided. Lin Yi was not a sloppy person. Seeing the situation, he made a decision immediately and then said, but if we want to open an elixir shop, the first thing we need to solve is the problem of the shop. The quality of the location of the shop often directly determined the popularity of the business. However, in this middle island, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven for ordinary people to get a shop in a good location. If one did not have a strong background and backing, it was purely wishful thinking. The shop is not a problem, I'll look for an old friend of mine for help, this is just a matter of a word. Brother Lin Yi, you just need to look for a good location first. The Will of Heaven patted his chest. He was the dignified deputy island master of the middle island. Even if he had been injured for so many years, his influence was still there, not to mention that his injuries had now healed. At this time, both Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang came back from work. After hearing Lin Yi's plan to open an elixir shop, both of them expressed their approval. Young hero Lin, actually you don't need to look for a location, I just happen to have a ready-made shop on hand, Kai Zhongyang suddenly said after listening. A ready-made shop? Lin Yi and the others were stunned and said doubtfully, Senior Kai, you don't want me to open it here at 5 Elements Commerce, do you? How is that possible? With the influence of 5 Elements Commerce, it will be difficult for young hero Lin to attract any customers even if it is just on this street, not to mention here. Kai Zhongyang shook his head and laughed. 5 Elements Commerce had the backing of Middle Island Elixir Hall, and it was indisputably the #1 chamber of commerce just by relying on the elixir business. If Lin Yi really opened the elixir shop next to it, he was afraid that there would be no customers at all. Where is it then? Lin Yi asked. That shop is not too far from here, it is only 4 streets away. Although the location isn't very prosperous, it is still quite good. Kai Zhongyang explained, it was originally a weapon shop, but because of poor management the owner can no longer make money. I have met him a few times, so I originally wanted to buy it and open a small medical shop, but I have been busy preparing for the auction recently, so I haven't had the time to care about it. Now I can ask him to transfer it to you. Isn't this stealing someone's beauty? Lin Yi said hesitantly. Hey young hero Lin, you worry too much. No matter what, this old man is still the deputy shopkeeper of the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce. Opening a medical center is just a personal hobby. This idea is just a spur-of-the-moment idea. If I really do this, this old man will have to carefully consider whether or not people will gossip about me. Kai Zhongyang waved his hand and said with a smile. Chapter 41:14. In that case, thank you very much, seniors. Lin Yi did not refuse and immediately agreed. It's not too late now. Why don't we go and have a look at the shop now? Kai Zhongyang suggested. That's what I'm thinking. Lin Yi nodded cheerfully, turned his head and said, Sydney, Xiaochan, you two stay here and talk. We'll be back soon. Okay. Sydney and Tian Chan agreed in unison. It was not suitable for them to show their faces in public, especially when Sydney was wanted on the street before, so it was even more difficult for her to go out. Lin Yi and the others immediately set off, and Kai Zhongyang led them to the chosen shop. Indeed, as he said, although this location was a little worse than the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, it was still quite a good place with people coming and going. The only regret was that the shop was not very big, but Lin Yi had only planned to run a small business with the 2 girls. It would be difficult to manage a big shop. The shop in front of them was enough for them to establish a foothold. He looked it up and down and was very satisfied with it as a whole. He asked for it on the spot, and with Kai Zhongyang's help, the original owner didn't ask for too much of a transfer price, only giving a very low friendship price. Even so, it was still 10,000 spirit jade. Kai Zhongyang had wanted to pay for Lin Yi in one go. 10,000 spirit jades was an astronomical figure for ordinary people, but as the deputy shopkeeper of the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, this amount of spirit jades was nothing to him. However, he did not expect that Lin Yi would take out a spirit jade card without hesitation and pay the bill on the spot. This scene really shocked everyone for a long time. They all knew that Lin Yi was a disciple of the 3 pavilions of the North Island. Who would have thought that a disciple of the 3 pavilions of the North Island would have so many spiritual jade? Only the will of heaven patted Lin Yi's shoulder and laughed. Brother Lin Yi was extraordinary. How could he be judged by common sense? After deciding on the shop, the next thing to do was to find someone to renovate the shop and transform it into a style suitable for the elixir shop. This task was taken care of by Kai Zhongyang. As the deputy manager of 5 Elements Commerce, he was the only one with experience among the people present. It was most suitable for him to take care of it. It would take at least 3 days to renovate, and during this period, it was just enough for Lin Yi to prepare elixir. Although Kai Zhongyang said that he could supply him at a low price, this was after all suspected of abusing his power for personal gain. Lin Yi did not want to ruin Kai Zhongyang's principles and reputation. Moreover, the 2 alchemists Lin Yi and Tian Chan were here. They did not need ready-made elixir. They only needed ready-made elixir materials. For this, Hou Guanqi could easily buy it as long as he called the alchemy hall. After everyone dispersed, Lin Yi returned to the room. Tian Chan and Sydney immediately greeted him and asked, "How is it? Is the shop satisfactory?" "Very good. I have already bought it." Lin Yi nodded and smiled. "By the way, Xiaochan, how is your level of alchemy?" "With my current level, I can at most refine 4th grade elixir. I can basically guarantee the success rate, but I can't guarantee the quality. However, elixir below 3rd grade is not a problem," Tian Chan replied. Lin Yi pondered for a moment. Previously, Kai Zhongyang introduced to him that in the market of Middle Island, almost no one would buy elixir below 3rd grade. Here, generally 4th grade and 5th grade elixir were more popular. Even 6th grade and 7th grade elixir appeared. If he wanted to open an alchemy shop to be competitive, the elixir sold must at least be 3rd grade and above. This was already the bottom line. "Alright then, Chan, you'll be in charge of making 3rd and 4th level elixirs from now on, and I'll be in charge of 4th and higher level elixirs. We'll try to make as many elixirs as possible in these 3 days, Lin Yi decided. So far, the highest elixir that Lin Yi had successfully refined was 4th grade. Although he would definitely try 5th grade or even higher grade elixir in the future, it seemed that the alchemy shop could only focus on 4th grade elixir for the time being. "Okay, I will listen to you." Tian Chan nodded happily. "What about me? What should I do?" Sydney asked. She was not an alchemist like Tian Chan, so she could not help Lin Yi. So she felt a little useless. "Sydney, you should take good care of yourself first. When the shop opens, you will be the proprietress of the front desk. You will be busy." Lin Yi joked with a smile. "Okay then." Hearing the word proprietress, Sydney could not help but blush. She bowed her head and did not speak. Lin Yi and Tian Chan smiled. At this time, Hou Guanqi had already asked someone to send the elixir materials. The 2 immediately took out the alchemy furnace and prepared to start alchemy. For the first time, they saw Lin Yi's unique divine pesticide cauldron. Sydney and Tian Chan were both surprised. The integration of modern technology and alchemy technology really opened their eyes. It could automatically refine elixir. It was simply an unheard-of alchemy artifact. However, when they thought of Han Jingjing, who was still missing, Lin Yi and the 2 women could not help but sigh. They secretly prayed that Han Jingjing would not be like the 2 women, being bullied and humiliated. 3 days was not long, but it was not short either. When Lin Yi put all his thoughts on alchemy with the help of the divine pesticide cauldron, his efficiency was absolutely shocking. Just like the last time in the extreme North Island, in just 3 days, Lin Yi once again refined a total of 124th grade elixirs. They were all the elixirs that Hong Zhong had given him before. There were many kinds of elixirs, and more importantly, they were all of the best quality. In contrast, the results of Tian Chan's alchemy in the past 3 days could only be regarded as average. 34th grade elixirs of medium quality and 33rd grade elixirs of high quality. Of course, many of them were the stock that she had refined before. She did not have the divine pesticide cauldron, so it was impossible to refine too quickly. The results of the 2 of them added up to a total of 180 elixirs. Although it was far from enough for a big chamber of commerce like 5 Elements Commerce, it was enough for a newly opened small elixir shop to support for a period of time. Here the elixirs were ready. Kai Zhongyang had also found someone to renovate the shop. Lin Yi did not specifically choose a good day to open the shop. After a simple preparation, he immediately decided to open the shop. The elixir shop was named Tiandan Pavilion. This was named by Lin Yi himself. He also let the deputy island master of Middle Island, the Will of Heaven, personally write the inscription. Although he was not a calligraphy master, the calligraphy on the horizontal board was like a dragon and snake. It had a grand pattern, which added a bit of extraordinary temperament to the shop. Chapter 41:15. Although the elixirs were only of the 4th and 3rd grade, there were so many excellent elixirs, and the price was much cheaper than other shops. As soon as the Tiandan Pavilion opened for business, it attracted many passers-by. Hey, am I seeing things? Why are there so many excellent elixirs? Someone came in and glanced around and he couldn't help but be stunned. That's right. This heavenly pill pavilion doesn't look very impressive, and the medicinal pills they display aren't that high-leveled either. However, more than half of them are rare top-grade pills. I feel that even the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce wouldn't be this exaggerated, right? Are they fake? The bystanders were surprised and suspicious. Fake? You don't know how to say others are fake. You have the nerve to come to our middle island to embarrass yourself? Look at the quality, which part of it is fake? Someone immediately retorted. Indeed, they are not fake. This old man is a specialist in alchemy appraisers. I have seen at least hundreds of alchemy pills, if not thousands. However, this Heavenly Dan Pavilion is obviously just a small shop with only a few shop assistants. Yet, the quality of the alchemy pills is not inferior to that of the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce. Other chambers of commerce simply cannot compare with it. This is really strange. An old man in the crowd affirmed. I dare to bet that the boss of this Tiandan Pavilion definitely has a strong background. Maybe he is controlled by a big shot in the alchemy hall. That's why he can get so many excellent elixirs. Otherwise, there is no other explanation. Someone was surprised and attracted the crowd's attention. Who cares so much? As long as they are really excellent elixirs and the price is so low, if we don't hurry up and grab them now, maybe we won't have such good stuff later. Looking at the crowded scene in front of them, and some people even started to rush to buy the elixirs, Lin Yi and the others looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. It was the first day of business and this was a rare good start. In fact, it was not strange for such a scene to happen. However, the Heaven Stage Island, especially the Middle Island, was full of people with good eyesight. With so many top-grade medicinal pills that they normally couldn't even snatch, and the prices were much cheaper than others, it would be strange if they weren't tempted at all. Business was booming, so Lin Yi and the others were naturally very busy. Lin Yi personally became the shopkeeper, and Tian Chan followed by his side to help. As for Sydney, she specially changed into a female uniform. She purposely covered her face with a veil and busied herself as a waiter. Hiring beautiful women as waitresses was a common tactic used by many large chambers of commerce. Not only could it attract customers, but it was also easier to make business with male customers. After all, not many men were willing to lose face in front of beautiful women. Therefore, the appearance of Sydney did not arouse much suspicion. Even if someone wondered why she was wearing a veil, they would only think that Tiandan Pavilion was trying to attract customers, and deliberately created a sense of mystery. In addition, she was very careful and never showed her beauty in front of customers. Even if someone was stunned by her and Tian Chan, it was only to satisfy their envy for the time being. For a while, it did not cause the expected trouble. After all, these people came for the medicinal pills. Normally, they would not stare at the waitresses. Seeing more and more spiritual jades coming in, Lin Yi could not help but be happy. If this continued, Tiandan Pavilion would soon be on the right track. This was the foundation for them to establish a foothold in the Middle Island in the future. At this moment, suddenly, a well-dressed middle-aged man came in from the door, with 2 subordinates behind him. Both of them were tall and sturdy men, revealing their gold core stage cultivation. After pushing and scolding with a fierce face, everyone was unwilling to cause trouble, so they immediately made way for them. Oh, Tiandan Pavilion? What a big tone. Such a small shop dares to call itself a pavilion? There are so many ignorant and fearless people these days. Aren't they afraid of being laughed at? However, this business is not bad. The middle-aged man said in a weird tone. What a joke. Yi Qingtang said. The crowd suddenly quieted down a little. Everyone's eyes moved back and forth between Lin Yi and the middle-aged man. They unconsciously showed an expression of watching the fun. Listening to the tone of this man, it was clear that he did not come with good intentions. Hearing this, Lin Yi looked at him coldly. Although there was an evil fire in his heart, he immediately suppressed it. He had been mentally prepared for this kind of thing as early as before the opening. As the saying goes, open the door to welcome guests from all over the world. No matter what kind of guests they would meet. Some were easy to serve and naturally some were difficult to serve. Especially since he was not familiar with the people in the place, he was afraid that the first day of the opening would not be so smooth and calm. Lin Yi secretly warned himself that now he was opening the door to do business. He must learn from Hongzhong. Only by being amiable can he make money. He must be patient in everything. He must not be impulsive. Otherwise, it would be difficult to keep this business open for a long time. Seeing that Lin Yi ignored him, the middle-aged man's tone suddenly became more strange. I have been here for so long, and there is no one who comes to greet me. How can such a shop open and do business? The big chamber of commerce is not so arrogant. Such a small broken shop, but not only has a big tone, but also such a big style. I really don't know where his confidence comes from. It makes me speechless. For a time the people who were busy buying stopped their actions. Their eyes were all focused on the well-dressed middle-aged man, and they whispered. Seeing this, Sydney did not want to put Lin Yi in a difficult position. She decided to bite the bullet and go up to greet him. She did not hope to make any business out of this person. As long as he did not affect other customers, she would be thankful. However, Lin Yi gently pulled her back and personally walked in front of the middle-aged man. He could see that this person did not come with good intentions and was afraid that it would not be so easy to get rid of him. It is a small business, so it is inevitable that I will not be able to serve you well. Please forgive me. May I know what you would like to buy? Lin Yi looked at the person and asked indifferently. Buy what? Do you really think I am here to buy something? With such poor eyesight, you have the nerve to open a pill shop here? The person sneered and looked up and down at Lin Yi. Then, with a face full of arrogance, he said, Listen carefully. I am the deputy shopkeeper of the medicine sect, Diao Huanshan. I heard from my subordinates that a new pill shop has opened here, so I came personally to see if there is anything I can do to cooperate with you. So he was in the same trade. After hearing this, Lin Yi immediately understood. As the saying goes, people in the same trade are enemies. The person in front of him obviously did not come with good intentions. His so-called cooperation was definitely not something good. Chapter 41:16. When Diao Huanshan heard this, he was stunned. His originally arrogant expression immediately became a little awkward. This heavenly elixir pavilion was only a newly opened small shop. According to his expectations and past experience, when someone suddenly heard that the famed medicine sect had such a big name, how could they not try to curry favor? He never thought that after he made a name for himself, the other party would still dare to be so indifferent. He had already said that he would give him a chance to cooperate, but not only did he not shed tears of gratitude, he was actually so unwilling. This was simply intolerable. So to say, shopkeeper, you don't plan to give me the face of the medicine sect? Diao Huanshan snorted coldly in anger out of humiliation. Lin Yi couldn't stop laughing when he heard that. This guy didn't even try to tempt him, but directly started to threaten him. The so-called cooperation with the medicine sect was obvious. He had already begun to reveal his fox's tail so quickly. Shopkeeper Diao, since we are all businessmen, then naturally business is our foundation. Face or not, shouldn't be something that we businessmen should consider, right? Lin Yi smiled indifferently, but seeing that the other party's face was livid, he didn't want to force him into a deadlock, so he immediately said, All right, Shopkeeper Diao, what suggestion do you have? Why don't you just say it? Diao Huanshan heard that and couldn't help but look at Lin Yi in surprise. This young man looked so young, but he didn't expect him to be so eloquent. With one sentence he took the initiative in the conversation. He could be said to be very experienced. However, in the face of absolute power, no matter how good your negotiation skills are, it's all useless. You can only obediently follow what I say, and don't even think about escaping from the palm of my hand. Shopkeeper, since you opened an elixir shop here, you should know that this is the territory of Zhongdao Market, right? Diao Huanshan asked with narrowed eyes. Of course, but so what? Lin Yi looked at him and asked back. The surrounding dozen streets, including the 5 Elements commerce area, were all within the territory of Zhongdao Market, which was several times larger than the North Island. Since you know that this is Zhongdao Market, shopkeeper, have you never heard of the Elixir Alliance? All the merchants who sell elixirs in the Middle Island Market Square must unconditionally accept the management of the Elixir Alliance. This is the rule and no one can break it, Diao Huanshan said with a cold smile. Elixir Alliance? Lin Yi was taken aback. He had never heard of this before. He had never heard Kai Zhongyang mention it during the few days he had been with him. Today was the opening of the new shop, so people like the Will of Heaven, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang would naturally come to support the opening, but they hadn't arrived yet. Lin Yi couldn't find anyone to verify the truth of the other party's words. What? From your expression, it seems like you don't believe me? Diao Huanshan curled his lips mockingly, then turned to the crowd and said, There should be some reasonable people among you. You shouldn't be so ignorant that you haven't even heard of the Elixir Alliance, right? I can prove this. Zhongdao Market does have a specialized elixir alliance. The purpose of its existence is to supervise the quality of elixirs sold by many merchants, so that fake elixirs won't harm customers and affect the reputation of our Middle Island market. I am the elixir appraiser of the Elixir Alliance, an old man in the crowd replied. The rest of the people present nodded. Even if they weren't merchants, this was common knowledge. As long as they had spent some time in Zhongdao Market, they would naturally know about it. Naturally, they would know about it. Now you shouldn't be suspicious anymore, right? You dare to open an elixir shop here without even knowing about the Elixir Alliance? Shopkeeper, you are truly ignorant and fearless, Diao Huanshan sneered. So what? The quality of the elixirs of our Tiandan Pavilion is absolutely reliable. There won't be any fake elixirs, and we can accept the inspection of the Elixir Alliance at any time. However, what does this have to do with the cooperation that shopkeeper Diao mentioned? Lin Yi asked calmly. We can accept the inspection of the Elixir Alliance at any time? Do you believe that yourself? Diao Huanshan suddenly laughed. He moved in front of Lin Yi and lowered his voice, saying, Shopkeeper, don't be so sure. We are out to do business, so who doesn't know about this? As long as we really put in the effort to check, there is no elixir shop without Wenny. Oh yes, by the way, we, the medicine sect, are in charge of this year's Elixir Alliance Chamber of Commerce. What do you mean? Lin Yi frowned slightly. It's very simple. All the inspections this year will be decided by the medicine sect. As long as we say you can do it even if you can't. However, if we say you can't do it even if you can. Do you understand what I mean now? Diao Huanshan threatened smugly. Shopkeeper Diao, could it be that you want me to pay a protection fee to the medicine sect? Lin Yi's face darkened. Although there was absolutely no Wenny in his elixirs, if the other party really insisted that there was Wenny in the name of the Elixir Alliance, then even if he could prove his innocence afterwards, at least his reputation would be ruined. This guy was a classic example of someone who could not do anything right, but was more than capable of ruining things. He really couldn't ignore him. Protection fee? No. We are the dignified medicine sect. How could we do such a lowly and shameless thing like collecting protection fee? Diao Huanshan shook his head repeatedly and raised his eyebrows. Didn't I tell you from the beginning? I came to you today to cooperate with you. What kind of cooperation? Lin Yi asked without a change in expression. It's very simple. The medicine sect can provide you with some elixirs and let you participate in the distribution. This is a big pie that fell from the sky. What do you think, shopkeeper? Of course, as long as you choose to cooperate with us, you naturally don't have to worry about the Elixir Alliance's inspection. Diao Huanshan tempted him. Using the Elixir Alliance as a threat to make my Tiandan Pavilion do the distribution for the medicine sect. This is his wishful thinking. Then, shopkeeper Diao, if we help you distribute the elixirs, how much will the purchase price be lower than your normal selling price? Lin Yi asked seriously. Of course we will sell them to you at the normal selling price. Diao Huanshan instantly laughed. Seeing that Lin Yi's expression was a little uneasy, he analyzed the pros and cons and said, Think about it, shopkeeper. For a small elixir shop like yours, when business is not good, you can only starve. But if business is good, it's very easy to run out of stock. This is something that will ruin your reputation. As long as you choose to cooperate with the medicine sect, you won't have to worry about this risk. Moreover, you can handle the inspection from the Elixir Alliance. This is a great thing. Don't you understand? Chapter 41:17. Profit? How can there be no profit? Other than the elixirs that the famous medicine sect will give you, I didn't say that you can't sell your own elixirs. Of course you must give us half of the profit. I'm sure you understand that, shopkeeper? Diao Huanshan laughed proudly without fear. Hearing this, Lin Yi was instantly angered and amused. Helping the famous medicine sect sell elixirs for free, not only did he not earn any difference in price and hard work, but he also wanted a share of the profit from his own elixirs. It was rare to see someone this shameless. Oh, I've understood everything. I'm sorry that I can't accept the cooperation that shopkeeper Diao has proposed. Please leave, shopkeeper Diao, Lin Yi said indifferently and gestured for him to leave. Although Diao Huanshan used the Elixir Alliance's inspection as a threat, Lin Yi didn't take it to heart. Anyway, there was nothing wrong with his elixirs. No matter how they inspected them, they couldn't make something out of nothing. Moreover, if something really happened, Kai Zhongyang and the others would definitely not stand by and watch. Kai Zhongyang was the assistant shopkeeper of the Five Elements Commerce. In terms of status and authority, he couldn't be worse than the assistant shopkeeper of the famous medicine sect. Moreover, he had the legendary god, the Will of Heaven, behind him. What? Diao Huanshan thought that Lin Yi had already recognized the reality and could only endure the humiliation to survive. He didn't expect Lin Yi's attitude to suddenly become so unyielding. He was instantly shocked and angry. I won't cooperate with the famous medicine sect. Shopkeeper Diao, please leave. Do you understand now? Lin Yi repeated with an indifferent expression. Good. You better think carefully. If you don't cooperate with the famous medicine sect, don't think about doing your business in peace. I want you to never have a foothold in the Middle Island market. Diao Huanshan said fiercely, feeling humiliated and angry. He didn't hide anything when he said that. In an instant, all the customers in the shop were stunned. They looked at each other and then looked at Lin Yi with sympathy. Lin Yi's eyes turned cold, but before he could speak, a cold voice suddenly sounded at the door. I haven't been out for years, so I never knew that Zhongdao has become a place where people bully others. Do you still have to look at other people's faces when doing business in Middle Island Market? As the voice spoke, the will of heaven strode in with his head held high. Diao Huanshan was stunned. He felt that this person looked familiar, but he couldn't remember who it was. However, he had long believed that a small shop like Tiandan Pavilion couldn't have a strong background. Even if it did, it couldn't be compared to the famous medicine sect. He didn't know where this guy came from, but he dared to talk to the famous medicine sect's assistant shopkeeper like that. Diao Huanshan naturally wouldn't let it go. He immediately snorted and said, Humph, this isn't called bullying, it's called working together. But if you insist on saying that this is bullying and twisting the truth, then I can't do anything about it. After all, the mouth is on your body. I don't have to rush to clean up after you. Diao Huanshan was fearless. He was still proud of his sharp eloquence when he suddenly heard someone in the crowd say in surprise, Huh? Isn't that the Deputy Island Lord of Heaven? That's right. I was fortunate enough to meet him many years ago. It really seems like the Deputy Island Lord of Heaven? It can't be. Didn't the rumors say that the Deputy Island Lord of Heaven went berserk and couldn't move his meridians anymore? How could he be standing here in one piece? Yeah, it said that he hasn't shown himself in front of people for many years. It can't be him, right? The will of heaven didn't care about the crowd's suspicions. He just looked at Diao Huanshan coldly and waved his hand. A cold and overbearing true qi instantly burst forth. Before Diao Huanshan could react, he felt his body shake, and his whole body was suddenly slapped away. Since he doesn't want to work together, then I'll send you on your way, lest you dirty the Tiandan Pavilion. The will of heaven said coldly. With his level, he didn't care to talk nonsense with this kind of person. Since he was a vicious dog, he would just beat him up. Bang! Diao Huanshan fell heavily in the middle of the street, sprawled on the ground. He was so dizzy from the fall that he couldn't get up for a long time. The two burly men who came with him instantly looked ferocious and wanted to attack the will of heaven. However, the will of heaven just gave them a simple look, and they were so scared that they almost peed their pants. They were drenched in cold sweat and didn't dare to move. The will of heaven didn't hit him hard. Although Diao Huanshan was in a sorry state from the fall, his injuries weren't that serious. He looked at the will of heaven up and down in shock and fear. After a moment, Diao Huanshan suddenly quivered. He finally realized that the person in front of him was actually the legendary figure who had shaken Middle Island in the past. He was the only person in history who could become the Deputy Island Lord in the nascent Soul Realm. He was the powerful person who could instantly kill people with a higher cultivation level, the will of heaven. In the blink of an eye, Diao Huanshan and his two subordinates were really scared to the point of peeing their pants. He had just spoken rudely to the will of heaven. What the fuck had happened to him today? Diao Huanshan was terrified. He knew that he had made a big mistake, but he didn't know how to fix it. He then heard the will of heaven continue, Today is the opening day of my sister Tian Chan's Tiandan Pavilion, so I don't want to start a massacre. I hope that some people will know their place and don't come here to look for trouble. Otherwise, I don't mind stretching my arms and legs a little. As soon as he said this, the onlookers immediately started discussing. Even those who were suspicious at first could now confirm that this person was the legendary The Will of Heaven. They didn't expect a small Tiandan Pavilion to have such a strong background. Even if some people guessed that it had a backer, they would never have thought that it was actually opened by the sister of the Deputy Island Master of Middle Island, The Will of Heaven. This backer was a complete mess. As for Diao Huanshan, who had been slapped out of the door, he was scared to the point of peeing his pants. He didn't dare to stay in this place any longer, so he hurriedly ran for his life. The unexpected appearance of the Will of Heaven immediately triggered a panic-buying frenzy among the onlookers. Even on this Heaven Stage Island, celebrity effects were important. The Will of Heaven was a typical living signboard. With the reputation of the deputy island master of Middle Island as a guarantee, everyone was more assured about the quality of the elixirs. More and more customers came after hearing the news. In less than a day, the elixirs on the display shelves were constantly being snatched up by people. The other benefit of the Will of Heaven's reputation was that those who had other ideas didn't dare to have any crooked thoughts anymore. Even if these people coveted the beauty of Tianshan and Sydney, they definitely didn't dare to act rashly in the store. Chapter 41:18. On the first day of business, more than half of the 180 elixirs that were prepared were sold. The sales volume even reached an exaggerated 6-digit number. Even Lin Yi himself didn't expect this result. After all, this wasn't an auction. It was just a normal store operation. No one would be stupid enough to bid a high price. Moreover, Lin Yi even lowered the price proactively. It was already very shocking that the sales volume could reach 6 digits on the first day. Even many big chambers of commerce couldn't reach this level. Of course, the Will of Heaven also played a part in this. If it wasn't for his appearance that caused the rush to buy the elixirs, or if it wasn't because of his existence that attracted more and more customers, the sales volume would probably be reduced by more than half. The sales volume reached 6 digits on the first day of business. Lin Yi and the others were only surprised. On the contrary, Kai Zhongyang, who was a standard industry insider, almost couldn't catch his breath when he heard about it. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. Young hero Lin, do you know that our 5 Elements commerce has the strong backing of Zhongdao Alchemy Hall? How much was the sales volume on the first day of business? Kai Zhongyang asked with a strange expression. How much? Lin Yi and the others asked curiously. 5 Elements commerce was undoubtedly the #1 chamber of commerce. Its data could almost be regarded as the highest record in the industry. 96,000 spiritual jade. Kai Zhongyang smiled bitterly and said, as far as I know, this has already left all the other top chambers of commerce far behind. It's an unprecedented record. But compared to young hero Lin's Tiandan Pavilion, TSK, hearing that, Lin Yi and the others couldn't help but look at each other. Building Tiandan Pavilion to buy elixirs was originally just a temporary idea. The purpose was only for Tianshan and Sydney to have a foothold in Zhongdao. That was all. However, he never imagined that he would accidentally lose to a leviathan like the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce. If these words didn't come from the mouth of Kai Zhongyang, the vice manager of the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, no one would dare believe it. Brother Lin Yi is a genius. Is it strange that he is better than 5 Elements Commerce? In my opinion, it's very normal. Although your master, Old Man Zhang, is also an unreasonable freak, he really isn't suited to do business. If he hadn't established the pill hall in advance and made a name for himself, I reckon that your 5 Elements commerce wouldn't even be able to earn a fraction of this Tiandan Pavilion's profit on the first day of business. The Will of Heaven laughed as he listened. That's true. Although the grade isn't high with so many top-grade pills, it's not surprising that they sold at such a high price. Ho Guanqi nodded and asked curiously, by the way, little friend Lin Yi, where did you get these supreme-grade pills from? That's right. I've been wanting to ask this question for a long time. Previously, during the auction in the extreme North Island, Hong Zhong was clearly being ganged up on by others and had no way out. In the end, he suddenly took out more than 100 top-grade medicinal pills. This matter has already become a legend in the industry. Could it be related to you, young hero Lin? Kai Zhongyang was equally curious. They couldn't be blamed for being curious. Outsiders might just be shocked, thinking that Zhongdao's pill hall had this kind of strength, but they didn't usually show it. But these two, as Zhang Liju's disciples, core members of the pill hall, had a much clearer understanding of this than outsiders. Unless Zhang Liju personally made them, otherwise, even if the entire Zhongdao pill hall gathered their strength, they wouldn't be able to take out so many supreme-grade pills in a short amount of time, unless they used their strategic storage. I won't hide it from you two seniors. Actually, I'm also an alchemist. I made these pills myself. Lin Yi said with a slight smile. Ah, really? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other, shocked. Master Lin, you're really a refiner? A refiner who can make large amounts of supreme-grade pills? And with such amazing medical skills, don't we have reason to suspect that you're our Sifu in disguise? Even in the Hall of Elixirs, where there were many elite refiners, it was rare for them to be able to concoct high-quality elixirs. Someone like Lin Yi, a dual practitioner of medicine and elixir, with such a high level of proficiency in both, seemed to be the only one in the entire world who could do so. Zhang Liju. Ha ho Kai, you two really have sharp eyes. Come, hurry up and kowtow to your Sifu. The Will of Heaven laughed and teased them. Hee, I don't think it's Sifu himself, but a disciple he took in outside? Other than Sifu, I can't think of anyone else who could raise a genius like Lin Yi. Hou Guanqi laughed as well. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Hou Guanqi had guessed it correctly, but before he met Zhang Liju, this cheap Sifu, he couldn't admit it. He just smiled and didn't say anything. After a while, Kai Zhongyang suddenly remembered what happened in the day and asked, I heard that Diao Huanshan from Yao sect came to cause trouble? He and Hou Guanqi were busy preparing for the auction and only came to support in the afternoon. They didn't bump into Diao Huanshan. Otherwise, with their status, if Diao Huanshan was present, he would definitely be able to recognize them, and there probably wouldn't have been such a commotion during the day. That's right, he threatened me with that Elixir Alliance's inspection, insisting that I distribute Yao sect's elixirs for free, and even take half of our profits. At this point, Lin Yi frowned slightly. Elder Kai, just how much power does that Elixir Alliance have? If they do something, will it affect my Tiandan Pavilion's business, or even directly force my Tiandan Pavilion to close down? If it's just a small elixir shop without a strong background, Elixir Alliance does indeed have the power to force it to close down, but don't worry, young Master Lin. With me here, you don't need to care about this Elixir Alliance at all. Just treat it like a fart. Kai Zhongyang curled his lips in disdain. So you're saying that Five Elements Commerce has a lot of power in that Elixir Alliance, right? Lin Yi asked. With the Heavenly Executioner acting as a guarantor, he was actually not worried about this matter. Any sensible person would not offend a legendary master like the Vice Island Master for the sake of a small elixir store. This was simply not in line with the logic of a businessman. Chapter 41:19. On the contrary, we, Five Elements Commerce, have nothing to do with the Elixir Alliance. Kai Zhongyang shook his head. Wah. Lin Yi paused and asked curiously, didn't they say that all the merchants selling elixirs in Zhongdao have to accept the Elixir Alliance's supervision? In theory, yes, but Five Elements Commerce is an exception. You might not know this, Master Lin, but when Five Elements Commerce was first established, there was no Elixir Alliance. However, because our Five Elements Chamber of Commerce is like the sun in the sky, many other elixir merchants can only use this excuse to isolate us and spread rumors that the quality of our Five Elements Chamber of Commerce's elixirs is not up to standard. They want to use this to fight against us. Kai Zhongyang curled his lips in a mocking manner. And the result? Lin Yi and the others asked. In the end, my master only said one sentence. As long as you have proof, I'll give the Elixir God title to the Elixir Alliance. But, can any of you afford it? Kai Zhongyang imitated Zhang Liju's tone and smiled in disdain. After that, we didn't even need to do anything. The customers all started boycotting the Elixir Alliance, and in the end they had no choice but to come to my master and beg for forgiveness. Only then did the storm die down. Haha, a bunch of clowns. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile, but in his heart he was amazed. His cheap master's influence and rallying power in Sky-class Island was really not to be underestimated. One sentence from him could decide the direction of the market, and this wasn't something that could be done with just power and position. So, although Five Elements Commerce isn't in the Elixir Alliance, as long as we say the word, they won't even dare to fart. I'll just talk to them, and I'm sure they won't come to Tiandan Pavilion anymore. Kai Zhongyang smiled and guaranteed. Alright, I'll be troubling you then, Elder Kai. Lin Yi nodded. With the double protection of the will of heaven and Kai Zhongyang, normal people with discerning eyes would not feel uncomfortable visiting them again. By the way, I see that although you have a lot of top-grade medicinal pills here, the highest grade is only 4th grade. This old man suggests that you add some high-grade medicinal pills that are 5th grade and above. Of course, there will be people who will buy Tier 3 and Tier 4 pills. However, this is just the opening. If we continue to stay at this level, we will lack competitiveness compared to other large pill vendors. It will be detrimental to our long-term development, Kai Zhongyang suggested after some consideration. Actually, I've thought about this problem carefully, but I don't have any elixirs above the 5th grade on hand, and I've never refined one before, so I can only take it slow. Lin Yi shook his head helplessly. Junior brother Kai is the vice shopkeeper of the Chamber of Commerce. It's not good for him to come out and help directly. How about I find a reason to get some from the pill hall? As long as the quantity isn't too big, it shouldn't be a problem. Hou Guanqi interrupted. Thank you for your kind intentions, seniors, but we don't need them right now. After all, we've just opened. These Tier 4 elixirs should be able to last for a while. Lin Yi quickly waved his hand to reject. Letting Hou Guanqi get elixirs from the pill hall as support was a simple method, but even if he used Spirit Jade to trade fairly, it would be easy for others to use it against him. If Zheng Dongjue found out about this, he would be labeled as a traitor. Even if Hou Guanqi was Zhang Liju's disciple in name, he wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Lin Yi didn't want him to take this risk because of him. Seeing this, Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other and didn't say anything else. It was just as Lin Yi was worried about. The risk was not small. At that moment, the will of heaven suddenly spoke up. You guys really can't see clearly. Isn't this simple? Lin Yi bro is an elixir refiner himself. Xiaohou, Xiaokai, you guys get him some tier 5 elixir recipes and materials and let him make it himself. That way people won't gossip, right? Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang heard this and their eyes lit up. They clapped and praised Lin Yi. Because he was too young, they subconsciously neglected the fact that this guy was a freak who could make large amounts of tier 5 elixirs. Even if Lin Yi had never refined a tier 5 elixir before, since he could refine a tier 4 elixir, then a tier 5 elixir shouldn't be a problem. Hou Guanqi immediately took out 3 elixir recipes from his arms and handed them to Lin Yi. My little friend Lin Yi, these 3 elixir recipes are all tier 5 elixir recipes. I'll ask someone to send the materials over later. You can take some time to try it out. If you can succeed, that would be great. Then I won't stand on ceremony. Thank you, Senior Hou. Lin Yi didn't refuse. This was exactly what he needed. Besides, the other party was his senior brother anyway. He didn't need to be too polite. He just needed to find a way to repay him in the future. Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang told Lin Yi a lot of their experiences in refining tier 5 elixirs. It wasn't until the sky was dark and they finished dinner that they left with the will of heaven. As for Lin Yi, Tianshan, and Sydney, now that they had Tiandan Pavilion which belonged to them, they naturally didn't need to go to 5 Elements Commerce with Kai Zhongyang. After a busy day, he let the 2 girls go back to their rooms to rest. Lin Yi began to refine tier 5 elixirs overnight. Although he had never tried it before, he felt that it shouldn't be a big problem with the Shenong Cauldron, an automatic alchemy artifact. Lin Yi took out one of the tier 5 elixir recipes and entered it into the tablet computer. The Shenong Medicine Cauldron immediately began to automatically analyze the alchemy curve. Although the waiting time was longer than when he refined the Foundation Establishment pill, the results showed that everything was normal. There were no accidents. Immediately, Lin Yi began to refine the tier 5 elixir according to the instructions of the alchemy curve. The process lasted for 2 hours before it came to an abrupt end. The final result was a failure. Looking at the pile of black residue in the medicine cauldron, Lin Yi was stunned for a long time. Since Han Jingjing helped him modify the Shenong Medicine Cauldron, he had never failed, especially after the Heaven Stage Island. This was the first time. However, after all, it was the first time he tried to refine a tier 5 elixir. Lin Yi was mentally prepared for failure. Fortunately, this failure didn't affect the Shenong Medicine Cauldron itself. Otherwise, if there was a furnace explosion and the Shenong Medicine Cauldron was destroyed, he would really cry. Chapter 41:20. Sure enough, after 6 hours, Lin Yi finally succeeded in refining the first 5th grade medicinal pill. The quality was superior, but there was still a gap from the best grade. However, Lin Yi believed that as long as the medicinal cauldron corrected it a few more times, it would be a matter of time. In the next few days, the business of Tiandan Pavilion obviously declined a lot compared to the first day of opening, and it gradually began to calm down. This was actually not strange at all. On the first day of opening, many people were attracted by the liveliness. It was rare to find so many best-grade medicinal pills, coupled with the living signboard of the Will of Heaven, which led to the scene of people scrambling to buy. Although elixirs were also consumables, they were not like food and drink. Most cultivators might not even consume a single elixir in a month. After these people bought the elixirs, they would not need them for a short period of time. Therefore, the decline in sales of Tiandan Pavilion was also reasonable. In fact, even the 5 Elements Commerce in the past could not be as popular as the opening of a new store every day. It was normal for sales to fall by more than half. However, after all, there were still a lot of best-grade medicinal pills on the display shelves, which naturally had a good attraction and appeal. Compared to the bleak situation of other shops that were deserted, the business of Tiandan Pavilion was still quite good, which made many people in the industry jealous and envious. It was not as full of guests as the first day. Sydney alone could handle the business in the store, which was just right for Lin Yi and Tian Chan. During the time of learning to refine medicinal pills, if even the 2 of them were forced to appear together, resulting in no time to refine medicinal pills, then it would really not be far from a shortage of medicinal pills. During this period of time, there was only one thing that Lin Yi had to do every day, which was to concentrate on refining medicinal pills. Not only did he have to try to refine more 5th-grade medicinal pills, but he also had to accumulate 4th-grade medicinal pills for future storage. However, the freshly made 5th-grade medicinal pills in Lin Yi's hands, he did not directly put them on the display shelves for sale. After all, Tiandan Pavilion had just opened. The best 4th-grade medicinal pills were still attractive enough, so he was not in a hurry to introduce 5th-grade medicinal pills. As for another more important reason, it was the news that Lin Yi learned from Kai Zhongyang that the Zhongdao auction would officially start in 10 days. Therefore, Lin Yi planned to hoard these 5th-grade medicinal pills and auction them together in the name of Tiandan Pavilion. If he wanted to promote the reputation of Tiandan Pavilion as soon as possible, this was a heaven-made opportunity that could not be missed. In addition, during this period of time, Lin Yi received another piece of good news from Kai Zhongyang. The Heart Devourer grass he'd been waiting for was finally here. There were 5 of them in total, and while it wasn't as many as Ning Xuefei's 10 portions, Lin Yi still managed to produce 8 ultimate quality foundation-building pills. The success rate was even more ridiculous than last time. Apart from the excellent quality of the 5 heart-devouring exquisite grasses, it was also because they were freshly collected. The shorter the storage time, the lesser the loss of medicinal properties. Naturally, the better the effect of alchemy. Although it was unexpected that 8 of them had appeared. But it was reasonable. He had the 8 supreme-grade pills in his hands, but he didn't need them for the time being. After all, he'd only just reached the peak of the late phase of foundation building with the pills, and if he kept using them recklessly, he'd be in trouble. It was easy to cause the foundation to be unstable, and the loss outweighed the gain. However, Lin Yi had no use for it at the moment. For Tianchan and Xueli who had low strength, these supreme-grade foundation-building pills were just timely help. With their current realm, as long as they consumed 1 supreme-grade foundation-building pill together with the bottleneck-breaking pill, they would be able to break through and level up. This unexpected surprise shocked the 2 women for a long time. With their relationship with Lin Yi, they could not say that they were not familiar with Lin Yi. However, they felt that Lin Yi was like Doraemon. From time to time he would take out a big surprise to surprise them. Even now, they were not sure where the limits of this man of theirs were. Lin Yi personally took care of the business of Tiandan Pavilion. The 2 women, Tianchan and Sydney, happily took the medicinal pills and went into seclusion to break through. As for the remaining 6 foundation-building pills, Lin Yi also left them with them so that they could continue to take them to level up after consolidating their realm. To put it bluntly, as long as he could find the heart-devouring exquisite grass, Lin Yi could refine the foundation-building pill at any time. However, if he let Tianchan do it, not to mention whether it could guarantee the foundation-building pill, there was a high chance that it would fail. After all, the foundation-building pill was not an ordinary product, and the difficulty of refining it was quite high. Dan Hall, Zheng Garden. Grandpa, you told me last time that you would find a way to make grandson's wish come true. But now, not only can you not find a chance, but you also let Tianchan move out to set up her own business. What should we do? Zheng Qianchu's position was getting more stable these days, and he took the opportunity to complain to Zheng Dongjue. The more he couldn't eat something, the more he coveted it. In the past, he could pester Tianchan every day, so he had the patience to wait for a while longer. But now that Tianchan moved out, watching the cooked duck fly away, this kind of feeling was really unbearable for ordinary people. What was even more unbearable was that Tianchan could move out, and it was actually his grandfather who personally approved it. This made him, who only wanted to play with his sister-in-law, how could he endure it? Humph, you only know how to revolve around women all day long. What great prospects can you have like this? Zheng Dongjue couldn't help but stare and scold. Compared to the dead Zheng Tianjie, Zheng Tianchu was much worse in all aspects. Helping him to be the successor was actually quite risky, but Zheng Dongjue had no choice. The other younger generation of the Zheng family was even worse than Zheng Tianchu. If he didn't choose Zheng Tianchu, who else could he choose? Grandpa, don't be angry. Actually, grandson is only thinking about Tianchan to be able to inherit my cousin's will. It's not that I don't want to improve, it's just to solve an obsession. Grandpa, didn't you also say that in the process of cultivation, there can't be obsession? Zheng Tianchu quibbled with his neck shrinking. Zheng Dongjue looked at him resentfully. How could Zheng Tianchu's little thoughts escape his eyes? However, it was a harmless matter for a man to be lustful. He was also at this age. As long as he could get his wish, he naturally wouldn't be so obsessed in the future. Let's wait and see first. Don't act rashly during this period of time. I still haven't figured out how well the will of heaven has recovered. However, last time when Tiandan Pavilion opened, he showed his hand in front of everyone and scared shopkeeper Diao away. Zheng Dongjue comforted. Chapter 41-21. It's only been a few days. His strength hasn't fully recovered, that's for sure. But with his domineering strength as the top nascent soul cultivator, even if he only recovered half of his strength, he's still a monster that can't be underestimated. It's the stupidest thing to recklessly clash with him. Zheng Dongjue warned sternly. Based on his performance this time, he's still very considerate of Tian Chan. If you provoke Tian Chan at this time, if he wants to kill you, even I can't save you. Zheng Tianchu was shocked. He only wanted to get Tian Chan, but he never thought about this. If it was someone else, they might not dare to do anything to him because of Zheng Dongjue, but if it was the will of heaven, he might not give his grandfather face. Compared to his own life, no matter how great the temptation of his sister-in-law Tian Chan was, Zheng Tianchu could only choose to endure it for now. He nodded helplessly. All right then, I'll do whatever Grandpa says. Don't worry. Even if Tian Chan moves out of the pill hall, she's still the daughter-in-law of the Zheng family. What's yours will never escape. Just wait and see. Zheng Dongjue and Zheng Tianchu looked at each other and smiled sinisterly. Medicine Sect, Middle Island Market. Diao Huanshan respectfully sat opposite a middle-aged man with a white face and no beard. This person was the shopkeeper of their medicine sect, Tong Yangsua. Shopkeeper Tong, you must help me this time. In order to take in this small Tiandan pavilion, I've lost all my face. I'm doing this for our medicine sect, and it concerns the image of our entire medicine sect. You can't just sit back and do nothing, Diao Huanshan complained gloomily. Relying on their strong position in the Elixir Alliance, they went to take in this newly opened small elixir shop and completely turned it into their puppet. This was the medicine sect's usual method of expansion. This method was tried and tested. Ordinary small shops didn't dare to go against the medicine sect at all. Because they didn't have a strong background, no other powerful figures and forces would stand up for them and offend the medicine sect. It had always been none of their business. Hang it up high. However, they did not expect that this time, they would kick an iron plate in front of this unprepossessing Tiandan pavilion. The Vice Island Master of Middle Island, the Will of Heaven, was such a tyrannical super expert. Not to mention their medicine sect, even their backer did not dare to easily provoke him. But no matter what, Diao Huanshan couldn't swallow this humiliation. He was thrown out in front of so many people. If he didn't find a way to get back at them, how could he survive in the Middle Island market in the future? Don't even think about raising your head when you walk out of the door. Brother Jiao, you've really been wrong this time. Whether it's me or the medicine sect, we'll keep this matter in mind. You can rest assured about this. Tong Yangsua comforted him with a stylized smile. Diao Huanshan frowned when he heard this. Something didn't seem right. What was the use of remembering it? Manager Tong, I've thought about it carefully these past few days. We really can't afford to provoke someone like the Will of Heaven, but if we just try to fix up Tiandan Pavilion, and as long as we don't go about it, we can use some small tricks to squeeze it. After all, the Will of Heaven isn't an expert. He won't come forward for such a small matter, right? Diao Huanshan didn't give up and suggested. Brother Diao, haven't you paid attention to the rumors outside these past few days? Kai Zhongyang from 5 Elements Commerce has already greeted the Elixir Alliance. Tiandan Pavilion, their Elixir Hall and 5 Elements Commerce are all on the same side. If we use insidious tricks to deal with them, we'll have to bear the consequences. Tong Yangsua looked at Diao Huanshan in surprise. Even 5 Elements Commerce came forward? Diao Huanshan choked instantly. Unwillingness was written all over his face. Although Tiandan Pavilion was Tian Chan's property, even 5 Elements Commerce came forward to protect it. This was really unexpected. Deputy Island Master the Will of Heaven wasn't enough. Now 5 Elements Commerce came, and it even involved the Elixir Hall behind it. How could this small Tiandan Pavilion have such a big background? So, although this Tiandan Pavilion is small, it really isn't a good place to provoke. Our boss behind the scenes told us to stop for a while and avoid the sharp edge for now. We'll wait and see what happens. Tong Yangsua conveyed the order. Alright, I'll follow the order. Diao Huanshan nodded helplessly. Then he didn't forget to complain, but the boss is really too much. That Tian Chan came from the Elixir Hall and they can't even interfere. Sure. Brother Diao, be careful with your words. Tong Yangsua was shocked. He hurriedly gestured for him to keep quiet, then said, there's no use complaining. Let's focus on the auction event first. It's going to start in 2 days. As far as I know, that Tiandan Pavilion seems to have already registered to participate. Are you serious? What can they auction with that little property of theirs? Do they think they're awesome because they have the support of the Will of Heaven? Diao Huanshan was shocked when he heard that. For businesses, the auction event of Middle Island had always been qualified to participate in the auction. Ordinary small businesses couldn't take out anything decent. They didn't even have the qualification to register, let alone take the opportunity to earn money in spirit jades. They probably want to use this opportunity to make a name for themselves. Didn't you say that they put out quite a lot of 4th grade elixirs? Although it's a little low level in Middle Island, it's still barely enough to register. Tong Yangsua then smiled coldly and said, "But this is good. It gives us a chance to suppress them openly. Let's hurry up and prepare. This time we can't let them get what they want. We have to beat them." Yes. This way, even the will of heaven and 5 elements commerce can't say anything. Diao Huanshan nodded in agreement. A few days later, the auction event of Middle Island officially began. As the top auction event of Middle Island and even the 5 big islands of Heaven stage, its specifications were naturally unparalleled. This could be seen from the venue alone. It was the center of Middle Island, the Middle Cauldron Mountain. Those who could enter Middle Pinnacle Mountain either had a strong background from a super sect or had extraordinary strength. As the saying went, there were no weaklings. This was the natural threshold of Middle Island's auction event. The specific location of the auction was on a very famous mountain peak in Middle Pinnacle Mountain. It was called 10,000 Sky Peak. On the platform of the mountain peak that had a circumference of a few miles, there were countless huge rocks scattered. Because the huge rocks were of strange shapes, each one was different. When one looked up, one could see countless shapes of the sky. That was how the name 10,000 Sky Peak came about. Chapter 41-22. This time, although Tiandan Pavilion had registered to participate in the auction, the representatives were the will of heaven, who had recently returned to the martial world and received much attention, as well as Tian Chan. As for Lin Yi, he appeared alone with Kai Zhongyang because he planned to bid for some treasures in this rare auction event. According to his past experience, it was very likely that he would offend some people, and it was also possible that he would be coveted after he got the treasures. If Lin Yi appeared as the shopkeeper of Tiandan Pavilion, he might bring trouble to Tiandan Pavilion. Pavilion A12, please follow me. Reception messengers were arranged everywhere in the venue to serve the many big shots present. Not only did they lead the way, but they also provided one-to-one service for all matters related to the auction. They were extremely thoughtful and experienced. It was the first time that Lin Yi had come to the 10,000 Sky Peak. Naturally, he was secretly surprised by the rare spectacle of the strange stone pavilions. Kai Zhongyang, who was beside him, explained with a smile, "There are a total of hundreds of pavilions and tea houses here, and they are divided into 4 grades from good to bad. During the auction, they have always been allocated according to the strength and background of the participants. Those who can get Pavilion A12 can be counted on one hand." Lin Yi nodded. Although Kai Zhongyang could not be compared with the real big shots of the sects in terms of strength and status, he represented the giant 5 elements commerce this time, so it was reasonable that he was arranged to Pavilion A12. At the same time, Lin Yi turned his head subconsciously and found that not far away, the will of heaven was leading Tian Chan to Pavilion A9. His ranking was even higher than the two of them. However, on second thought, even though the current Heavenly Dan Pavilion was still not up to par, it could not withstand the great reputation of a legendary expert like Tian Xing. As the once all-powerful Vice Island Master of Middle Island, it was not strange for him to be valued so highly by the organizers now that he had recovered from his injuries. Under the guidance of the reception messenger, Lin Yi followed Kai Zhongyang to Pavilion A12. Because the position was much higher than other ordinary pavilions, the view was excellent. It was also very close to the auction booth in the center. It was indeed a rare good position. He chatted leisurely with Kai Zhongyang as he watched the crowd enter. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This scene, this grandeur. The auction at the extreme North Island paled quite a bit compared to this. After a while, the auction of Middle Island officially began. When the auctioneer appeared on the auction booth in the center, everyone's eyes lit up. It was a graceful and beautiful woman. She wore a light and translucent white dress, and the hot and exquisite wonderful curves were hidden in it. The dress swayed gently with the breeze, and the beautiful scene that flashed by intentionally or unintentionally was simply fascinating. In particular, this woman was not like those young girls who were 17 or 18 years old, but about 30 years old. Her whole body exuded a mature charm that made any man unable to resist. Beside her, there was another blonde girl who was similarly good-looking but dressed in revealing clothes. She was holding a silver plate as she stood by the side. She complimented her dignified and intellectual appearance and was very pleasing to the eye. This scene really made all the men present swallow their saliva. The organizers could be said to have taken great pains. Just the 2 women standing on the stage had already attracted the attention of all the people present. Only Lin Yi was quite indifferent to this. With so many beautiful female confidantes, his resistance to beautiful women had long been far beyond ordinary people. He came to participate in the auction, not to see beautiful women. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's auction of Middle Island officially begins. Let's look at the first auction item. Although this female auctioneer looked dignified and holy, her tone and voice were very coquettish. If you paid attention, you could even find that she gently licked her tongue seductively. But Lin Yi's attention was not on her. His eyes fell on the silver plate of the blonde girl next to her. He opened the red cloth above and revealed a weapon that looked like a knife. The first auction item is the meteor blade provided by the rich and powerful families. This is a weapon of the Foundation establishment stage. Its blade is as thin as a wing, and after infusing it with true qi, its speed is like a meteor. It is unavoidable and indestructible. It is the first choice of many close combat masters. The base price is 3,000 spirit jade. The female auctioneer introduced with confidence. This meteor blade looks not bad. Lin Yi secretly praised it, but he didn't mean to buy it. Although he was short of weapons of the Foundation establishment stage, the king of junk had already cast half of the weapons. At this time it would not make much sense to get a meteor blade. After all, weapons were different from elixirs. They could not be bought and used. It would take a lot of time to specially practice them before they could be used in actual combat. However, although Lin Yi didn't want it, there were many others who were interested. After all, the appearance of this meteor blade looked very good. 3,100 spiritual jades. Someone immediately shouted out a bid. In this auction, every bid must be at least 100 spirit jade, so this could only be regarded as a test. 3,200 spirit jade. Someone immediately raised the price. 3,500 spirit jade. Then someone was not willing to be outdone. After a short while, under the continuous bidding of the female auctioneer, the price had been raised to 5,500 spirit jade. Lin Yi, who was watching coldly, also found a pattern. These people who bid were concentrated in the Pavilion D, which was the lowest area of the auction. This was not surprising. People who could come to the auction of the Middle Island were all big shots with deep backgrounds. Those who were interested in a weapon of the Foundation establishment stage must only be in the Foundation establishment stage. Of course, they could only be regarded as the lowest existence here. In the end, this meteor blade was won by someone at the price of 6,000 spirit jade. After the hammer was hammered, this meteor blade was directly handed to the person by the receptionist. At the same time, the person also took out the spirit jade card and swiped it on the spot. Seeing this, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. This process was simple and direct enough. The typical payment and goods were settled on the spot. However, the spirit jade card, which was rare in the North Island, seemed to be very common in the Middle Island. Now let's invite the second auction item. It is the highest grade spirit jade provided by the all-access auction. The base price is 1,000 spirit jade. Everyone please look. The female auctioneer reached out to remove the covering cloth. Then, on the silver plate, a large super spirit jade appeared in front of everyone. Chapter 41:23. However, as soon as the female auctioneer's voice fell, the scene fell into a brief silence. No one was willing to bid. After all, no matter how rare this item was, it was only a piece of spiritual jade in the end, and not some other rare and precious treasure. Although it could be used to assist in cultivation, its effects obviously could not be compared to pills and the like. If it was purely based on the exchange of volume, this super spiritual jade could at most be exchanged for 100 spiritual jades, which was already the limit. However, the starting price was already 1,000 spiritual jades. It was simply blind to bid based on this point. No matter how many spiritual jades there were, they should not be wasted like this. However, since the organizer dared to call a starting price of 1,000 spiritual jades, it was not completely unreasonable. It should be known that even on Heaven Stage Island, where strength was respected, there were still many people who liked to be cultured. This super spiritual jade did not have many other uses, but for jade carving enthusiasts, its value was not small. Unfortunately, from the awkward situation at the scene, it seemed that there were no jade carving enthusiasts here. No matter how much the female auctioneer tried to exaggerate, no one was willing to waste spiritual jades and rashly bid. It was about to be auctioned off. At this time, Lin Yi suddenly opened his mouth. 1,100 spiritual jades. The audience was surprised, and their eyes immediately focused on the A12 pavilion. Even Kai Zhongyang, who was sitting next to Lin Yi, could not help but be slightly stunned. Young hero Lin, I didn't expect you to have this hobby. I didn't realize it before. This old man has a few friends who are also people in this field. When we go back, I can introduce you to them. You will have a common language." Kai Zhongyang laughed. Lin Yi smiled non-committally and didn't say anything. In fact, a pragmatic person like him wouldn't be interested in jade carvings at all. He was just here to watch the show and didn't even think about bidding. The reason for this? The reason was all because of the ghost. He suddenly used his divine sense to remind Lin Yi that this super spiritual jade was a rare thing. Only then did Lin Yi change his mind and bid. At this moment, when the audience saw that the person who made the bid was number 12, their gazes were filled with envy and jealousy, but there was also a hint of schadenfreude. From their point of view, only a young master of that level would waste his spiritual jades on something that was not practical at all. However, the more the other party wasted, the more they enjoyed watching the show. In any case, it wasn't their spirit jades that were being destroyed. This situation, on the other hand, wasn't a bad thing for Lin Yi. As long as no one was bidding against him, he didn't mind being laughed at by these people who didn't know what was going on. The feeling of making a fortune in silence was pretty good. However, just as Lin Yi thought that he was in the bag and the female auctioneer was about to bring down the gavel, someone suddenly called out from the nearby pavilion, "A15, 1,500 spirit jades." Lin Yi was slightly taken aback. When he heard the voice, he turned his head to look. When he saw the person's appearance, his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. It was a familiar face. Snow Sword Faction's Wei Xinjin, and that bitch Situ Qian was sitting beside him. 2,000 spirit jades. Lin Yi immediately increased the price. Even if the other party wasn't the adulterous couple Wei Xinjin and Situ Qian, he was still determined to get this super spiritual jades under the guidance of that damn thing. Now that the road was narrow for enemies, there was no reason for him to give in. 2,500 spirit jades. Wei Xinjin frowned and continued to increase the price. 3,000 spirit jades. Lin Yi said without raising his head. The audience was instantly in an uproar. In their eyes, the starting price of 1,000 spirit jades for this super spirit jade was already a loss. Now it had actually soared to 3,000 spirit jades in the blink of an eye. These disciples of the class really had too many spirit jades to spend. 3,500 spirit jades. Wei Xinjin gritted his teeth and said, 4,000 spirit jades. Lin Yi still had an indifferent expression on his face. There wasn't the slightest change in his expression, and he didn't even look like he was heartbroken. Lin Yi didn't lack spiritual jades. Now that he had the Tiandan Pavilion, a money-making machine that made tens of thousands of spiritual jades a day, he was even richer than ordinary people. A mere few thousand spirit jades was nothing to him. I bid 5,000 spirit jades. Wei Xinjin didn't want to be outdone. He didn't wait for Lin Yi to continue bidding. He walked to the side of the pavilion and cupped his fists. I am Snow Sword Faction's Wei Xinjin. My wife has taken a fancy to this supreme-grade spiritual jades and wants to use it to make a pair of wedding accessories. I hope that everyone can be tolerant and make things convenient for us. When everyone heard that, they couldn't help but look at each other. Snow Sword Faction wasn't a small faction in the Middle Island. Being able to obtain Pavilion A15 in this auction was already an affirmation of their strength and status. Ordinary people couldn't afford to offend them. Moreover, since Wei Xinjin had already said that, ordinary people would probably have to give him face. After all, this super spiritual jades weren't something important. It wasn't worth it to provoke a powerful opponent for this flashy but impractical spiritual jades. When the auctioneer saw this, he frowned. Wei Xinjin's behavior was completely breaking the rules of their auction. If everyone followed his example, they wouldn't have to auction it in public. They would have discussed it in private. However, no matter what, Wei Xinjin was still an A-ranked guest. Furthermore, this super spiritual jades could fetch a high price of 5,000 spirit jades. This was already far beyond their expectations. So they turned a blind eye to it. Just when everyone thought that the matter had come to an end, Lin Yi slowly said, 5,100 spirit jades. Originally, Wei Xinjin was already determined to win. When he heard that, he instantly froze on the spot. His expression became incomparably ugly. As for the other people present, they were also discussing in low voices. They were secretly shocked at Lin Yi's identity. He was truly worthy of being able to sit in Pavilion A12. His background was so deep that he didn't even put Snow Sword Faction in his eyes. When Wei Xinjin just finished speaking, this guy immediately bid 5,100. Previously it was still 500 and 500. Now it suddenly increased to 100. This was simply a slap in the face. They didn't know where this young man came from. Look, the person sitting beside him is Kai Zhongyang from 5 Elements Commerce. Could it be that this young man is from 5 Elements Commerce? A sharp-eyed person below the stage discussed. I've been going to 5 Elements Commerce frequently recently. I've never seen this person before. Could he be a disciple from the Pill Hall? The Pill Hall and 5 Elements Commerce are one entity. This is very possible. Someone else guessed. Chapter 41-24. At the same time in Pavilion A15, Sidu Qian complained bitterly, Brother Wei, I really like that piece of spiritual jade. It would be great to use it as a wedding accessory. You can't just back off like this. I know. Wei Xinjin nodded with an ugly expression. He gritted his teeth and raised the price, 5,500 spiritual jades. Even if he was a core disciple of the Snow Sword faction, even if he was an expert in the early stage of the Gold Core realm, he would still be heartbroken to waste so many spiritual jades for such a super spiritual jade. Unfortunately, even so, Lin Yi would not let him and Situ Qian get what they wanted. 5,600 spiritual jades. Lin Yi continued to raise the price without changing his expression. Good. Very good. Very good. Wei Xinjin looked at Lin Yi coldly and snorted, My friend, I will remember you. I will remember you too. Lin Yi immediately replied with a cold smile, Originally, I could have bought it for 1,100 spiritual jades. You raised the price to this. Very good. Let's wait and see then. Wei Xinjin was so angry that he laughed. Even though he was a little worried about Lin Yi sitting next to Kai Zhongyang, he could not lose in this situation. Moreover, in his opinion, even if this guy knew Kai Zhongyang, it did not mean that he was a member of the Pill Hall. Even if he was a member of the Pill Hall, it did not mean that his position was very high. As a core disciple of the Snow Sword faction, it was not that he did not have the confidence to take revenge. As long as he did it cleanly and did not reveal any flaws, it would be fine. Wei Xinjin's undisguised threat was a rare scene in the eyes of the bystanders. However, Lin Yi did not intend to pay attention to him at all. From the secular world to the heavenly stage island, he had heard this kind of threat more than 100 times. If he took it seriously every time, Lin Yi would not be able to remember it and would not have the leisure to do so. Young hero Lin. This old man has heard of this Wei Xinjin before. He is the rising star of the Snow Sword School's younger generation. Both his strength and methods are very shrewd and ruthless. You should be careful. Don't give him an opportunity to use underhanded methods, warned Kai Zhongyang with some concern. Although in the cultivation world, the most important thing was one's own strength. Wei Xinjin was a master in the early stage of the Gold Elixir realm. In everyone's eyes, Lin Yi, who was only at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, was no match for Wei Xinjin. Don't worry, Elder Kai. Anyway, I've been enemies with him for a long time. What's the difference? Lin Yi shook his head indifferently. Thinking of the enmity between Lin Yi, Sydney, and the Snow Sword School, Kai Zhongyang did not say anything more. He could only pay more attention to Lin Yi in the future. 5,600 spiritual jades. Even Wei Xinjin had no choice but to withdraw unwillingly. This price had already far exceeded the value of the super spiritual jades. Naturally, no one else would bid against it. Without a doubt. The super spiritual jades fell into Lin Yi's hands. Holding the super spiritual jades in his hands, Lin Yi was curious about its value. However, under the watchful eyes of so many people, it was not good for him to test it. He could only put it aside for now. When he returned, he would ask that damn thing about it. As the next auction item went up on stage, the commotion caused by the super spiritual jades was quickly forgotten. After all, everyone had come here to bid for treasures. Watching the excitement was just a diversion. They would not pay attention to it for too long. The ones who would truly remember this matter were probably only the two parties involved. Or in other words, only Wei Xinjin, who had lost face. Lin Yi would never pay too much attention to this kind of person. The next few auction items were each more valuable than the previous one. The lively crowd began to gradually shift from the lower-level area of the Ding family to the more competitive upper-level area. After all, they were the main force of this auction. However, these things could not enter Lin Yi's eyes. Either they were not to his taste or their quality was not high enough. Although Lin Yi was still an expert at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm and was not considered a big shot in the Middle Island, where there were many strong people, his vision was not lower than the other big shots present. Especially because of the existence of the Tiandan Pavilion, he did not lack spiritual jades at all. On this side, Lin Yi did not make a bid. On the other side, Wei Xinjin did not want to be left out. He took a valuable golden core stage weapon. It was shaped like a hair clip. It was a divine weapon tailor-made for female cultivators. Although it did not have fatal attack power, after wearing it, there was a certain chance of increasing the defensive power. At the same level, A defensive weapon was far more valuable than an offensive weapon. After all, it was not easy to cultivate. The more powerful a cultivator was, the more they cherished their own lives. A defensive weapon like the hair clip, which did not require much practice or even deliberate use, was even rarer. However, the defensive ability of this thing could only be considered average. It could resist a golden core stage expert's attack, but once it was a battle of a higher level, this thing was completely useless. The key point was that this was a golden core stage weapon. Currently no one around Linny could use it. Therefore to him this was a chicken rib. Otherwise he would definitely intervene and not let it fall into the hands of Wei Shinjin. Brother Wei, you are so good to me. I have wanted this hair clip for a long time. Moreover, it is a rare golden core stage weapon. Can you help me put it on? I want to go back and let those foxes in the sect have a good look at it. They will be so jealous. Situ Qian said sweetly. Wei Shinjin frowned slightly. However, he still nodded and agreed. He took the hair clip and helped her put it on. Situ Qian took the opportunity to fall into his arms. The two's display of affection attracted a lot of attention from the surrounding people. Situ Qian was not shy about this. Instead, she enjoyed this feeling. Wei Shinjin had always been her Prince Charming. Now that she had finally won him, of course, she wanted others to see their love and sweetness. What a pity. If we could get that supreme-grade spiritual jade as well, then this auction would be perfect. We just happen to lack a pair of wedding accessories, Brother Wei. Situ Qian complained in a dissatisfied tone. That blind kid thinks he can be arrogant just because he has Kai Zhongyang's support. He dares to ruin my plan. He really doesn't know what's good for him. Don't worry, I guarantee that he will not live past today. Wei Shinjin glanced coldly in the direction of A12. Yes, I knew that Brother Wei would not let me down. Situ Qian nodded. At the same time, Lin Yi also felt the malicious gazes of the two. However, he did not take it seriously and smiled faintly. He continued to watch the auction. Chapter 41-25. His attention returned to the auction. He had seen so many auction items in a row, but there was no treasure that made his eyes light up. Lin Yi was inevitably disappointed with this auction. However, at this moment, looking at the next auction item, Lin Yi's eyes suddenly froze. The next auction item is provided by the Central Chamber of Commerce. It is a high-tech product from the secular world. It is a single-lens reflex camera and a solar charger. The starting price is 20,000 spirit jades. The female auctioneer introduced the item in a seductive voice. Looking at the single-lens reflex camera on the silver plate, everyone's eyes were obviously a little more passionate. As for Lin Yi, he felt like he was struck by lightning at first glance. He was stunned in his seat for a long time. The same question kept repeating in his mind. How did he bring this up? Normally, if one wanted to use the teleportation array to land on the heavenly island, any high-tech and sophisticated item would be destroyed by the powerful pressure of nature. This was a problem that no one could avoid. The reason why Lin Yi could bring a mobile phone up was because of the jade space. No one else had such a heaven-defying cheating method. It couldn't be that there were other jade spaces in this world, right? However, the others present were not as shocked as Lin Yi. Recently, there was a wave of technology craze on Middle Island. High-tech products from the secular world were simply popular on the entire island. Each of them could be sold at a sky-high price, but they were still highly sought after and in short supply. Central Chamber of Commerce? Lin Yi's heart quivered. Why is it this Chamber of Commerce again? Previously, Si Haishao suddenly became the North Island shopkeeper of the Central Chamber of Commerce. Now, this Central Chamber of Commerce actually magically obtained high-tech products from the secular world. Why does it feel a little strange? Young hero Lin, haven't you heard of it? This is a recently rising Chamber of Commerce. No one can find out who its backer is, but it suddenly sprouted like bamboo shoots after a rain. According to our calculations, its current scale should be close to our 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce's, Kai Zhongyang explained to him when he saw the scene on the side. So exaggerated? Isn't that a little scary? Lin Yi couldn't help but be surprised when he heard that. 5 Elements Commerce had a strong backing like the Pill Hall. It had been the undisputed #1 Chamber of Commerce for so many years. If it was another super Chamber of Commerce with a deep foundation such as the Hong Chamber of Commerce trying to catch up, it would be more understandable. However, this Central Chamber of Commerce was a new Chamber of Commerce that had suddenly risen. It's not just you, young hero Lin. All of us in the industry are more shocked than you. But no matter how unbelievable it is, they still did it. Perhaps it won't be long before this Central Chamber of Commerce takes over the leading position and becomes a legend in the business world. Kai Zhongyang sighed with a sigh. While the two of them were talking, the surrounding people were shouting out bids one after another. In just a short while, the price had already reached the height of 50,000 spirit jades. Everyone was far from giving up. This is too exaggerated. Linny couldn't help but be speechless. In the secular world, this is something that can be found everywhere. It's not rare and it's not worth much at all. But it can actually be sold for such a sky-high price here. My Tiandan Pavilion's daily sales can't even compare to a digital camera. What kind of world is this? The rarer something is, the greater its value. This is an unchanging truth. Although this thing was common in the secular world, it was a rare treasure on the heavenly island. It might even be the only one that could be found in a scorpion's poop. It's not strange at all that it can be sold for such a sky-high price. Kai Zhongyang sighed. Be that as it may, but in the eyes of a common world person like me, this is still too ridiculous. Back in the common world, even the lowest level, trashy elixir was worth at least 1,000 times more than a DSLR camera, but now it's the other way around. It's unbelievable. Linny smiled bitterly, still feeling like it was unreal. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. Incredible is right. The emergence of this central chamber of commerce itself is incredible. It almost relied on its own strength to set off a technological craze in the entire central island, and it has a tendency to sweep through the other 4 islands. Everything here is a huge profit. Every time it is sold, it will snowball faster and faster, and it will become bigger and bigger. It's simply unstoppable. Kai Zhongyang shook his head helplessly. This sudden rise of the Central Chamber of Commerce was so mysterious and powerful that it had now become a target that all the Chamber of Commerce forces must take seriously. Perhaps if they were not careful, it was not impossible for them to be swallowed by it in the future. Since this Central Chamber of Commerce can sell these technological products from the secular world, doesn't that mean that it has a way to travel between the secular world and Heavenly Island? Lin Yi's eyes suddenly lit up. If the Central Chamber of Commerce only sold 1 or 2 items, it might be possible that its behind-the-scenes owner brought it all at once through some special means, nothing more. However, it was now focusing on technological products. If it wanted to supply such a large-scale product, it was impossible to bring it all at once. It must have its own unique supply method. With the conditions of Heavenly Island, it was simply unrealistic to want to produce it here. The goods could only come from the secular world. In other words, the people of this Central Chamber of Commerce must be able to freely travel between the secular world and Heavenly Island. If not, there must be a way to travel between the 2 worlds, otherwise it would be impossible to explain all of this. This guess was absolutely reasonable. Moreover, Linny had long been wondering how his cheap master Zhang Liju, whom he had yet to meet, had returned to the secular world back then. That damn thing had turned into such a cowardly state after a trip back, yet his cheap master had returned with no problems at all. Now that the doubts of the Central Chamber of Commerce were confirmed, it was enough to prove that returning to the secular world from Heavenly Island wasn't completely impossible, it was very possible. Thinking of this, Linny couldn't help but feel a burning passion in his heart. After being on Heavenly Island for so long, he would be lying to himself if he said that he didn't miss his friends and brothers in the secular world at all. If there was a way to go back and see them, it would be a huge wish of his. Of course, guesses were just guesses. Lin Yi also knew that with his current identity, it was simply impossible for him to go to the Central Chamber of Commerce to ask about this. In fact, it wasn't just him. Even if the top bosses of the 5 Elements Commerce and the Hong Chamber of Commerce came forward, they wouldn't even bother with them. Probably, but no one knows what exactly is going on. We don't even know who the behind-the-scenes owner of this Central Chamber of Commerce is, so it's even more impossible to find out about these core secrets. Kai Zhongyang smiled and said. Chapter 41-26. Core secret, they rely on this to continue to develop and grow, this is their way of making money, it is indeed impossible to disclose. Linny nodded. That's right. One thing we can be sure of is that they must have some special channels to get these things from the secular world. However, they will never reveal even half a word about it. Just like our 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, there are some special and rare medicinal herbs that can't be found in the outside world. It's also very difficult to find them in the deep mountains, but only we can artificially cultivate them. This is our secret. The Chamber of Commerce relies on this to maintain its core competitiveness. In the end, this SLR camera was sold for a sky-high price of 68,000 spirit jades, and the next few auction items, all provided by the Central Chamber of Commerce, were also technological products from the secular world. Walkie-talkies, surveillance cameras, foot bathtubs, even all kinds of canned food from the secular world appeared. Although they were not as practical as a group of technological products, because of their rarity, they were also sold at a high price, which shocked Lin Yi and made him secretly envious. Casually making some common things from the secular world, almost without any cost, could sell them at such an amazing price on Heaven Stage Island? Was there a more profitable business than this in the world? What was exorbitant profit? This was the real exorbitant profit, shocking the world. Lin Yi felt that alchemy was already enough to make exorbitant profits of spirit jades, but compared with the Central Chamber of Commerce, it was simply incomparable. If he could figure out the secret of the Central Chamber of Commerce traveling between Heaven Stage Island and the secular world, with Lin Yi's means and the assistance of an artifact like the space of the Jade Pendant, even if there was only one person doing this business, it would definitely not be much worse than the Central Chamber of Commerce. Of course, this could only be a casual thought at the moment. The key was the secret. He could only wait for the opportunity to slowly dig it out. However, no matter how good the Central Chamber of Commerce was at keeping their secrets, but there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall. He believed that one day he'd be able to grasp this secret, and then he'd be able to return to the common world. Starting from the SLR camera, there were a total of 10 items, all of which were technological products from the Central Chamber of Commerce, each of which was sold at a staggering price, detonating the first peak of this Middle Island auction festival. For a moment, the name of the Central Chamber of Commerce was firmly engraved in the hearts of everyone present. Even those who had never bought anything from it would definitely have a deep impression of it and would not easily forget it. However, the name of another shop immediately entered everyone's line of sight. Moreover, it had only used a few pills in total, yet it had almost achieved the same effect as the Central Chamber of Commerce. Its name was Heavenly Dan Pavilion. Let's move on to the next item. The Tiandan Pavilion, which had recently opened in the Zhongdao market, came from an unknown small business, but the auction items it offered were not simple at all. I don't think I need to go into detail about the effects of a top-grade gold core. The starting price is 30,000 spirit jades, the female auctioneer said with a smile. Before his voice died away, everyone's breathing suddenly became heavy. A gold core was extremely rare, not to mention a gold core of the highest quality. To any golden core stage expert, it was simply a fatal temptation, and they would not hesitate to go bankrupt for it. Gold core, as the name suggested, was the same as the Foundation Establishment pill. After taking it, one could break through a level, but the difference between it and the latter was that it was effective for golden core stage experts. The rarity of a gold core was not only because this kind of fifth-grade pill was difficult to refine, but also because its refining materials were extremely difficult to find. One of the most important and core materials was the 10,000 crossing golden dan fruit. Lin Yi had 3 10,000 crossing golden dan fruit, but it was a fruit after all, and it was not convenient to store it for a long time. After a long time, it was easy to lose its medicinal properties, so Lin Yi used it to refine it into a gold core. 3 myriad crossing golden dan fruits and 5 golden cores were made. This was the biggest harvest he'd gotten in the past while he'd been concocting. Young hero Lin, a supreme-grade golden core, this is an unprecedented amount of wealth. Kai Zhongyang, who was at the side, knew for the first time that Lin Yi actually took this thing out for auction, and he could not help but exclaim. One must know that this gold core, even in the 5 elements commerce, was a good thing that could be used as a last resort, let alone a gold core of the highest quality that could only be found by chance. I can't bear to part with it, but in order to promote the reputation of Tiandan Pavilion, I was forced to go all out. You can't catch the wolf if you don't sacrifice the child. Lin Yi replied with a bitter smile. This was the truth. Seeing that he was getting closer and closer to breaking through to the gold core, no one would want to auction off their gold core. In the eyes of any normal person, that was simply stupid. However, if a gold core of the highest quality could be exchanged for a meteoric rise in Tiandan Pavilion, then it would not be a loss. This time Lin Yi really put in a lot of effort. 40,000 spiritual jades. From the beginning, this competition for a gold core of the highest quality could only fall into the hands of the big shots in Area A. Everyone in the other areas could only be envious, because they did not have the capital to do so. 50,000 spiritual jades, 70,000 spiritual jades, 90,000 spiritual jades. The previous auction items, even the technological products taken out by the Central Chamber of Commerce, only increased by a few thousand spiritual jades. Now that it was the gold core of the highest quality, it increased by 20,000 spiritual jades, which made people's blood boil when they heard it. In the blink of an eye, the bidding broke through the 100,000 spiritual jades threshold with an unstoppable momentum, and it was still rising crazily. No one found it strange because it was a matter of course. Even if it was a gold core of the lowest quality, it would cost at least 30,000 spiritual jades in the 5 elements commerce, and a slightly better one would cost 50,000 spiritual jades, or even more. And this gold core of the highest quality, if it fell into the hands of a talented gold core expert, could directly break through 1.5 levels. The success rate was far higher than that of ordinary quality. If one could get 100,000 spiritual jades, it would be a blessing. Unfortunately, this was the auction event of Middle Island, and everyone in Area A was from a rich family. If they really wanted it, 100,000 spiritual jades was just the starting price for them. For such a good thing that everyone coveted, Wei Xinjin, who was in the early stage of the gold core realm, was naturally drooling. Unfortunately, his capital could not be compared to the other young masters of sects with rich backgrounds. When he saw that the bidding price had exceeded 100,000 spiritual jades, he could only give up. No matter how much he thought, he did not have enough spiritual jades, so he could only admit defeat. In the end, this gold core of the highest quality, at the sky-high price of 170,000 spiritual jades, was bought by a young man in Pavilion A. Chapter 41-27. Linny glanced at him. This young man's background was probably so deep that it could not be any more. 170,000 spiritual jades, but he didn't even bat an eyelid from beginning to end. It could be said that he regarded spiritual jades as dirt. This calmness could not be faked. As for the others, although they regretfully missed the opportunity to obtain a peak-grade golden core and there was only one in the entire auction, they still remembered the name of the Heavenly Pill Pavilion. All of them secretly hoped that they would be lucky. They were thinking that they had to quickly find time to go to this unknown little shop to take a look. Although it was not famous, since this Heavenly Dan Pavilion was able to make a peak-grade gold core, then maybe there was a second one. Who could say for sure? After that, Linny also put out 3 best Jindan bottleneck-breaking elixirs. Like the Jindan, they were also of the 5th grade, but the price was much lower than that of the best Jindan. The final transaction price of the 3 supreme-grade golden core bottleneck-breaking pills was only 130,000 spirit jades, and this was all thanks to the supreme-grade golden core, which had whetted everyone's appetite. Otherwise, the price would have been even lower. However, the Heavenly Elixir Pavilion had already achieved a great victory in this auction. Not only did the 4 elixirs sold for a sky-high price of 300,000 spirit jades, Linny earned a huge sum of money. More importantly, the name Heavenly Elixir Pavilion had already been firmly engraved in everyone's heart, just like the name of the Merchant Association in the Central Island. From now on, the name of Heavenly Elixir Pavilion had spread throughout the entire island. As for the medicine sect, Tong Yangsui and Diao Huanshan, who had been thinking of suppressing Tiandan Pavilion before at this time, they didn't even mention it. From the moment the best Jindan was put out, they had been shocked speechless. They knew that all the preparations they had made before were stupid and futile. Looking at this situation in the eyes of the people present, this newly opened small Tiandan Pavilion was probably much more attractive than their old medicine sect, which made them depressed to the point of collapse. However, they were helpless and could only look at each other in dismay. First, there was the strong rise of the Central Chamber of Commerce, and then there was the unknown Tiandan Pavilion. Today's auction in Zhongdao had become a special event for these two. All the other auction items before and after the auction did not create as much of a sensation as these two, nor did they leave a deep impression on people like these two. The auction continued in an orderly manner, although rare treasures continued to appear. However, it was not as eye-catching as before. However, when it was nearing the end, the Central Chamber of Commerce once again released a piece of heavy news. The next auction item is provided by the Central Chamber of Commerce. It's very special. It's not a heavenly material or earthly treasure, it's not a divine weapon or medicinal pill, and it's not a rare treasure either. It's just a letter. The female auctioneer paused on purpose. As expected, the crowd burst into an uproar when they heard the words Central Chamber of Commerce. Their eyes lit up. They didn't expect it to be a letter. What kind of treasure was this? Unexpectedly, the female auctioneer's next words shocked them. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I'll have to pay a visit to you. Do you have any relatives in the secular world? Were there any descendants? Do you have friends? If you do you want to contact them but have no way? Hearing this, Lin Yi's eyelids suddenly twitched. Thinking of the secret that the Central Chamber of Commerce could travel to and from the secular world, he had already guessed the meaning of this letter. This letter provided by the Central Chamber of Commerce can give you this opportunity. This is not a regular auction. As long as you have a fixed price of 100,000 spirit jades, you can get a chance to communicate with the secular world by letter. Don't think that this is a scam because this is a two-way service. As long as your letter is delivered to the secular world, the Central Chamber of Commerce will bring you a reply, so it's not a scam. The female auctioneer attracted everyone's attention. For a moment, the atmosphere in the hall became a little strange. The letter delivery service provided by the Central Chamber of Commerce was meaningless to most of the people present because they had nothing to do with the secular world. Naturally, there was no need for them to write a letter. However, for some special groups of people, this was an unexpected opportunity bestowed by the heavens. Some still had families and friends in the secular world. Some were even like Lin Yi, cultivators who came from the secular world. Suddenly hearing this service, it would be a lie to say that they weren't excited. However, just to write a letter, they had to pay a sky-high price of 100,000 spirit jades. This price was really unbearable. If 100,000 spirit jades could be used to bid for some rare treasure, then it could be of help to one's strength. But this letter, other than relieving homesickness, what else could it be used for? Could it be used to survive, or could it be used to improve one's strength? Wasting 100,000 spiritual jades just to get someone to deliver a letter. This kind of thing was definitely a scam. There were not many people who had such a strong capital. In the eyes of most people, only a fool with water in his head would do such a stupid thing that made people speechless. However, after a moment of silence, there was finally someone who took the bait. "Count me in." Lin Yi hesitated for a moment and was the first to speak. This time he had earned 300,000 spirit jades from auctioning the elixirs. Although 100,000 spirit jades was ridiculously expensive, he could still afford it. To be honest, in the past 6 months on the heaven-level island, Lin Yi's concern for the secular world grew stronger day by day. Almost every day he would think about the current situation over there. Was everything going smoothly, or did something unexpected happen? It was just that he had no way of contacting them, so he could only suppress this worry and longing in his heart. But now, suddenly, the Central Chamber of Commerce suddenly fell from the sky and provided this kind of letter delivery service. For Lin Yi, it was like sending charcoal in snowy weather. Even if he knew that there might be risks, he couldn't help but want to give it a try. It was only 100,000 spirit jades he could afford to gamble. Everyone's eyes suddenly focused on Pavilion A12 again. There was mockery and suspicion, and there was a lot of discussion. What is this kid's background? At this moment, Wei Xinjin had the same question in his heart as everyone else. Although he had already made up his mind to find a chance to get rid of this troublesome kid, Lin Yi's behavior still made him unable to help but feel nervous. Sitting together with Kai Zhongyang, he could conveniently take out 100,000 spirit jades, and he also had a connection with the secular world. These three halos superimposed together made Lin Yi's identity even more mysterious and unpredictable, causing people to have wild and fanciful thoughts. After Lin Yi took the lead, there were a few people in the hall who immediately bid for this service. 3 of them came from Area A, and 1 from Area B. They should all be people with deep backgrounds. It was unknown whether they were cultivators from the secular world like Lin Yi, or whether they had relatives in the secular world. Chapter 41:28. After bidding for this service, the receptionist immediately sent each of them a stack of fine paper. The quality was excellent, and it was engraved with the seal of the Central Chamber of Commerce. This was specially prepared for them as a letter. Lin Yi didn't say anything and immediately bent over the table to write, describing his experiences in the past half a year on Sky Class Island, all kinds of things big and small. He especially emphasized that he had found Sydney and Tianchan, telling them not to worry. As for the recipients of this letter, there was a long list of names. Not only were there Song Lingshan, Sun Jingyi, and other close female friends, but also his lackeys. Lin Yi believed that no matter which one of them received this letter, it would be seen by everyone and circulated among each other. After writing, Lin Yi immediately stuffed the letter into an exquisite envelope and stamped it with a wax seal. Only then did he hand it over to the receptionist beside him, asking him to send it to the Central Chamber of Commerce. At this time, the auction of Middle Island had just ended, and it was time to leave. "Young hero Lin, you'd better come with me, or you can meet up with Elder Sky and the others. It's best not to act alone at this time, just in case." Kai Zhongyang gave Lin Yi a look and pointed to the A15 pavilion on the other side. At this moment, Wei Xinjin's sinister gaze just happened to look over. "No need, Elder Kai, you go back first. I can take care of this small matter myself." Lin Yi smiled faintly and shook his head. He knew that this time, Wei Xinjin would definitely take revenge on him. After all, he was an early-stage Golden Core master. Not only was he taking revenge for Sydney, but even if it was just for the sake of eliminating hidden dangers, he had to find a way to eliminate this threat as soon as possible. If he went back with Kai Zhongyang or the will of heaven today, then no matter how bold Wei Shinjin was, he wouldn't dare to make a move against him in front of these two. He would definitely choose to endure and look for opportunities to take revenge in the future. This was not a good thing for Lin Yi. Rather than giving the initiative to his opponent, he might as well show a flaw and lure the snake out of its hole. Lin Yi believed that if Wei Shinjin found out that he was alone, that guy would definitely not be able to hold back. As long as he was prepared in advance, this would be the best opportunity to counterattack. Very well. You need to be careful. No matter what, that fellow is a core disciple of Snow Sword faction. Do not force yourself. Do you understand? Kai Zhongyang saw that Lin Yi was so insistent, so he could only warn him. Don't worry, Elder Kai. I know what I'm doing. Lin Yi nodded. After descending from the Wantian peak, Lin Yi immediately parted ways with Kai Zhongyang. Wei Shinjin, who was trailing far behind, saw this and his eyes lit up. He had been worried that Lin Yi would leave with Kai Zhongyang. He did not expect the opportunity to come so soon. Chen, you go back first. I have something to do. Wei Shinjin immediately turned his head and instructed Situ Qian, who was leaning against him. Brother Wei, I'll be waiting for your good news. I'll be waiting for your good news. Don't let that annoying fellow get away. Situ Qian naturally knew what Wei Shinjin wanted to do. She immediately nodded in agreement. She was very confident in Wei Shinjin's strength. She was very confident in his strength. Wei Shinjin responded and immediately tailed Lin Yi. He was far behind the crowd. His tracking ability was much better than an ordinary person's. If one did not pay attention, it would be very difficult to discover him. Unfortunately, Lin Yi's perception had long since locked onto him. No matter how he pretended, Lin Yi could see through him. He was just like a clown. Yet, he still thought that he was concealing his tracks and thinking that he was very clever. After the time it took to burn a stick of incense, there were fewer and fewer people around. They had left the core area of Middle Island. Wei Shinjin began to gradually shorten the distance and was ready to attack Lin Yi. He did not know who Lin Yi was, nor did he know where Lin Yi lived. But at least he knew that if he wanted to kill Lin Yi to vent his anger, today's opportunity must not be wasted. Once he missed it, he might not have such an opportunity in the future. Seeing that there weren't many people around and seeing that Lin Yi had turned into a secluded alley, Wei Shinjin couldn't help but feel happy. This was a heaven-sent opportunity, and he hurriedly chased after Lin Yi, gathering his chi and preparing to attack. However, as soon as he turned the corner and saw the empty alley in front of him, Wei Shinjin was stunned. What the hell? Where did that guy go? Why is he gone? At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared above his head and flew towards Wei Shinjin. Wei Shinjin was shocked. Especially when he saw the person's face, he was even more shocked. This guy who suddenly appeared was the martial man who took Sydney away and injured him, Lin Yi. Good, there's a way to heaven but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell but you want to barge in. Let's see how you die this time. Wei Shinjin was surprised and happy. He did not have the time to think about why Lin Yi suddenly disappeared and this martial man Lin Yi suddenly appeared here. He only had one thought at this moment, and that was to kill this martial man Lin Yi and take revenge for the failure last time. As a core disciple of the Snow Sword faction, there was no doubt that Wei Shinjin's strength was strong. His reaction was not slow either. Almost in an instant, all the genuine chi in his body surged out, and the silver sword on his back was immediately unsheathed. The temperature within 1,000 feet suddenly dropped a lot, and there seemed to be snowflakes falling faintly. This was the sign of the Snow Sword faction's core martial technique. Once it was used, the surroundings would definitely be accompanied by snow. This time, Wei Shinjin had learned his lesson of underestimating his opponent. As long as he used his true strength, he did not believe that he could not kill this martial man Lin Yi. However, as soon as the snow-colored sword light flashed, it was mercilessly suppressed by a powerful genuine chi that descended from the sky. Strictly speaking, this wasn't a stream of pure chi but a bomb, a terrifying killing move that combined pure chi bomb and pellet firebomb. Lin Yi had been gathering it since he came out of the auction house, waiting for this moment. Boom. In an instant, the earth quaked and the mountains swayed. Even with Middle Island's super high-grade protective array, everything within a radius of several miles was directly leveled to the ground without any suspense. Even the surrounding passers-by who were affected by this sudden change in expression. In this Middle Island, although Golden Core stage experts were not rare, such a strong aftershock was not something that ordinary people could create. The dust gradually settled, and seeing the passers-by experts quickly surround him, Lin Yi glanced at Wei Shinjin, who was blown to the point where it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. He found a convenient position for himself to escape, but he did not immediately turn around and escape. Chapter 41-29. This was because Situ Qian definitely knew that Wei Shinjin had chased after him for revenge. At that time she would definitely think that he was the one who killed Wei Shinjin. What Lin Yi needed to do now was to ensure one thing: it didn't matter if Wei Shinjin was dead or not. Today's incident had to be blamed on Wu Fulingi, and it had nothing to do with him. After deliberately stopping for a moment to let the passerby experts who heard the news see his face clearly, Lin Yi then turned around and disappeared from everyone's sight. That person looks familiar. Where have I seen him before? Sure enough, a passerby expert said doubtfully. Isn't that Snow Sword Faction's Wei Shinjin? I remember now. A while ago, Snow Sword Faction put a man and a woman on the wanted list. That person just now seems to be the man. I think his name is Ling 1 or Ling 2. Someone quickly reacted. Don't worry about that. Just inform Snow Sword Faction about this. I heard that this guy is quite a show-off. He has always been popular with women. Who would have thought that he would end up like this? He might even lose his life. How miserable. A passerby expert immediately sent a message to Snow Sword Faction. Wei Shinjin was attacked by Wu Fulingi. No one knew if he was dead or alive. This explosive news instantly shook the entire Snow Sword Faction. This was different from Sydney's elopement. Not only did it affect the faction's reputation, but it might also cause the death of a promising core disciple. For any faction this was a huge matter. Looking at Wei Shinjin's mangled body, Situ Qian almost cried until she fainted on the spot. If it wasn't for the fact that a few passerby experts insisted that Wei Shinjin was the culprit, she would have directly informed the higher-ups of the sect and asked them to go to the Five Elements Chamber of Commerce to force Kai Zhongyang to hand over the culprit. Once again, the Snow Sword Faction mobilized all their forces and issued a bounty for Wu Fulingi. And this time, they directly offered a bounty of 10,000 spirit jades. A few days later, Wei Shinjin was rescued by the Snow Sword School and finally returned from the gates of hell. However, this news did not cheer up the entire Snow Sword School. Even Wei Shinjin himself became completely disheartened after learning of the situation and fainted. Aside from the internal and external injuries in his eyes, all the meridians in his body had been shattered. Wei Shinjin, the core disciple of Snow Sword Faction who had received much attention, had now become a cripple. Geniuses had been reduced to dust, and they could not even compare to ordinary people. All of this, however, had nothing to do with Lin Yi. The Snowsword sect had been in an uproar because of Wei Shinjin's matter, but from start to finish, the blame had been placed on Wu Fulingi, who didn't exist. It didn't affect him at all. What Lin Yi needed to do now was to refine some 4th and 5th tier medicinal pills in addition to cultivating every day. Then he would take a stroll around Tiandan Pavilion. It was a peaceful and comfortable life that he had never had before. After the auction, there was an endless stream of customers who came because of the auction. In the past few days, Tiandan Pavilion's business could be said to be unprecedentedly booming. The daily sales were already close to the first day's opening. If this continued, the business would only get better and better. It was completely on the right track and everyone who saw it felt happy. However, while Lin Yi and the others were overjoyed, the Will of Heaven had a worried expression on his face for the past few days. In fact, he had no choice but to find Lin Yi to drink. Big brother Tian, what's bothering you? Lin Yi drank a few cups with the Will of Heaven before asking. In his eyes, the Will of Heaven had always been a person with a strong mind. Even with his meridians shattered, he had been able to persist for so many years. Ordinary matters should not have been able to make him so depressed. Hey brother Lin Yi, I have indeed been depressed for the past 2 days. The fickleness of human nature is the fickleness of the world. Favors are truly unreliable. In the end, I can only rely on myself, said the Will of Heaven with a wry smile. Brother Tian, tell me what happened? Asked Lin Yi. A few days ago, I thought I would be able to see a few old friends in the Middle Island auction. In the end, not a single one of them appeared. So, the day after I returned, I went to the Island Lord Pavilion at the summit of Middle Cauldron Mountain. I wanted to see my old friends and restore my position as Vice Island Lord. In any case, my injuries are no longer a problem. It is just a matter of time, said the Will of Heaven as he drank. And then? Did something happen? Lin Yi vaguely guessed what had happened. I thought it would be a matter of course. I didn't expect the Island Lord to reject my request with the excuse of my absence in the Island Lord Pavilion all these years. He said he wanted to hold a meeting to discuss it. What disappointed me the most was the attitude of my old friends who were Vice Island Lords. None of them were willing to stand up for me. It really made me feel disappointed and speechless. To think that I had always thought that they were my loyal friends. The Will of Heaven said indignantly. After listening, Lin Yi did not look surprised. No matter how powerful they were, they could not escape the word snobbish. This is actually not incomprehensible. From their standpoint, no matter which one of them, I'm afraid they would not want you, a Vice Island Lord, to come out and fight for power with them. What do you think, Brother Tian? Linny analyzed for him. Yeah, it's not that I don't understand that. It's just that every time I think about it, I still feel suffocated. The Will of Heaven sighed, if only that old man Zhang Liju was here. He's the famous Island Lord of Sky-class Island. Even the Island Lord would have to think twice about his words. It's too bad that he's always been elusive. It's hard to find him. Forget it. In my opinion, they're probably using this to test Big Brother Tian's bottom line, and they want to find out exactly how much strength you've recovered. Once they see through it, they'll probably become even more ruthless. Linny shook his head. He didn't know how strong the Will of Heaven was, but one thing was for sure. The Will of Heaven's strength was far from his peak. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in such a situation. At the end of the day, strength was the deciding factor. If he wanted to get those people to agree, relying on favors wouldn't work. The only way was to quickly recover his strength. That was the right way. I won't hide it from you, lil bro. My strength has already recovered to the peak of Golden Core late stage. I'm only one step away from recovering my nascent soul, but it's this last step. Sigh. The Will of Heaven sighed helplessly. With his combat strength, Golden Core full stage was definitely not weak. But to think that he could recover his position as the Vice Island Lord of Middle Island with that alone was a pipe dream. The key was that strength wasn't something he could recover just because he wanted to. If it was below nascent soul, it was still fine. With the attainments of the Will of Heaven, he could easily do it, but nascent soul was already close to his peak. It would be very difficult for him to break through in a short period of time. R1152.